evening, everybody, and welcome once again to the HorrorCultFilms Podcast. I'm David Smith, and I'm joined once again by Misters Jim Lamming and Ross Hughes. Say hi, guys.
Hi.
Hello there.
They're my sidekicks for the night here, as we come together like a Justice League to talk about these movies. And tonight it's the ultimate superhero slobber knocker. No, it's not Batman vs Superman, it's Whedon v Snyder. We're going to be talking about not just one, but two versions of Justice League, because at long last, Warner have released the Snyder Cut, a movie the studio denied existed, then the fans seemed to will into existence. Now there will be some disagreements here, but if the debate gets too intense, guys, we're going to use our safe word, Marfa. Before then, we're going to be talking a little bit more about both directors, along with the state of the DC universe to date. But first, let's kick off with the usual question. Guys, what the heck have you been watching lately? Why don't we start with you, Jim?
Recently, the Horror Channel have been slowly playing the Hellraiser movies. So the most recent one was Hellraiser 3, which is probably the worst of the original three. I believe they're the only ones that were released in the cinema and have their own little section in the entire series. It started off pretty well, actually. It had a really good first half, establishing the characters, setting up what's going to happen, and then it just goes to shit. I think they tried to steer it down to be too much like Nightmare on Elm Street got, with all the one-liners, quips, little comedy moments, that sort of thing. And the Cenobites were shit.
Yeah, you got what, the movie camera Cenobite, the CD
the guy
Cenobite or something.
Yeah. The guy with the camera in his face, the DJ who had all the CDs lodged in his head, and just the goth lady with a fag. Yeah, just stood there smoking.
I ranked the Hellraiser films a couple of years back. I put number 3 as my second favourite. But I accept the second film is in a lot of ways better. It's got a much more ambitious design to it. It's more unique. It's more in line with the first. But I really just sort of liked the, fuck it, we're just going to let Pinhead let loose here, Like, there's just something quite apocalyptic about the entire film.
Yeah, it's not a bad film by any means. It's just that it really does not stick the landing. The setup's great and it looks fantastic. I'm really into studio films where you've got those massive matte paintings in the background. All looks brilliant. And, it's the early 90s. I'm really fond of films made around that era. And it does line it up, but it just fails to knock it down at the end. Once Pinhead is released from his statue prison, it's a fun little bit in a club with all the chains and everyone getting absolutely torn to shreds. But it just all of a sudden flips and goes into one-liners and stuff like that. It's very jarring, I suppose. And then it just, there's a few explosions and then it finishes.
I liked what you got with Pinhead back in story, where you meet him as a soldier.
Yeah.
I thought that was cool. I mean, Pinhead as a statue, a pillar at the beginning was somewhat goofy. But in fairness, you work with what you have. That was the end of the previous one. But have you seen all the other sequels before? I
think it's Bloodlines that I might have seen. It was on the Sci-Fi Channel some years ago. I remember enjoying it, but don't really remember much of it. Obviously, I've watched the first two over the last month or so. As I say, they've been slowly being played on the Horror Channel, and the first two are brilliant. I would say that, in my opinion, the first two are just as good as each other, especially how ambitious in scale the second one is. But no, I am keen to see the sequels, but getting hold of them as a collection seems to be now an impossible task, by the looks of it.
Pretty much, yeah. A lot of them are on streaming for a few weeks at a time. But I've seen all 10 of them, and number 10 is very good. Number 6 is really unintentionally funny. But there's a dark period when you watch part 7, you'll think, it's a good concept done badly. This must be the low point for a series. Then you reach number 8, and you're like, Well, that was shit. But it can't be any worse than that. Venue's number 9. But that trilogy, that run of 3 is dire. But number 10 really impressed me. It brought a lot back. It's genuinely quite unpleasant to watch.
I'm sorry, but I got to mention Inferno Part 5. It's one of my favourites of the franchise. Scott Derrickson, of course, done Doctor Strange. Can we mention Marvel in this podcast?
It's not against the rules, but yeah.
I think Inferno is absolutely brilliant. It's one of the most underrated sequels of all time.
I mean, with that, I didn't like the film that much because it was like a murder mystery
Yeah.
where the audience know that Pinhead done it, right? But the characters don't, so you're watching them slowly figure out it's Pinhead. But at the same time, it looked absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
Like, you could just see, like, there's a real quality to the aesthetic that I don't think any of the other non-cinematic ones have. I think Part 4 was a cinema one as well, by the way, but yeah.
Yes, it was, yeah, but that was the prequel when it was actually the 18th century one. I like that one as well. It had a very good ending to that.
It was both prequel and sequel, because you also had the outer space section.
Oh, God, Pinhead in space.
Yeah, that's the other one I've seen then. I remember the space bit.
Anyway, sorry, what else have you been watching, Jim?
Not a lot, really, because I've got to say Justice League is taking up a lot of time, would you believe? But I did watch another film, not quite a horror film, but it was a Kurt Russell dirty cop thriller called Dark Blue, set to the backdrop of the LA riots in '92. And it was very unsettling. I don't know whether I've got an anxiety problem or whether it was just that film, but my heart's been racing ever since I've watched it. But yeah, it's just a great cop procedural, dirty cops getting to the bottom of, it all, and it's just a great looking film. And with it being set in the night, it's really my thing. So the sets and the costumes look fantastic as well.
And what about yourself, Ross? What have you been watching lately?
I think I'm going through a weird spell at the moment. I think I've got a bit of lockdown fatigue, as I have all these films to watch, and I've struggled of late to watch anything. But as Jim said, maybe because Zack Snyder's Justice League was like 20 hours long, and it took me 4 days to watch it. But much like Steph, who herself is sadly missing tonight, I also missed the Lost podcast, and I absolutely thought, guys, you've done a fantastic job on discussing 3 of the most complicated films you could ever review. So a massive well done. But since that last podcast, the one I appeared on, I think I've watched the new Wrong Turn film, which I think, David, you mentioned in one time.
Oh, yeah. What do you think of the new Wrong Turn?
I think it'll piss off the fan base who love nothing more than a bit of Three Fingers and his merry men. But you know what? I enjoyed it. I think it will end up being the Halloween 3 or Jason's The New Beginning entry, a sequel reboot that fans will probably appreciate a lot more in a few years' time once the franchise goes back to the inbred killing family. But I really, really enjoyed it. I thought the dark concept was pretty horrific, and having sat through the horrid Cabin Fever remake, I mean, at least the director and all these people involved had the balls to try something different.
I'd agree with that. It's a very different type of movie. I mean, it almost shouldn't be called a Wrong Turn one, right? One thing I would question you on, though, between you guys, have you ever met a proper fan of the Wrong Turn franchise?
No.
I mean, it's one of those things like Children of the Corn, where I don't think I've ever met anyone that properly likes those films, or. I know a couple of proper Hellraiser fans. I don't think Hellraiser is comparable, even though there has been some dodgy quality control. There's still a really solid set of films at the beginning. But Children of the Corn doesn't even have that. And The Purge is another one where I know plenty of people who watch the Purge films, but I don't really know anyone who loves the Purge films. And I think Wrong Turn's one of those ones that, if you watch it of habit, if people heard there's never going to be a new Wrong Turn ever again, I don't think many people would give a shit. I mean, I think that's maybe why this one got a cinema release, because they're saying, oh, well, by this point, we may as well just do a complete reboot of the series. And I don't think people were... it's not like Child's Play, where you reboot Child's Play, but you still have to keep the original continuity going, because you also have that fan base,
It's obvious they're going to go back to the the old concept after this one, which is a shame, really, because I liked the lead character, the female. It had a really good ending, which it could have been explored further, but I doubt we'll ever get to see that happen because the demand is there for Three Fingers and his gang to come back. So we probably have, wrong turn 10. Oh shit, we took a wrong turn again.
I don't know. I'd be willing to make a long-term bet that we never see them again. I think my long-term bet would be the one we just got. I think that will get a sequel, but I think original continuity is over. I don't think we'll ever see that again.
You reckon?
Yeah, I think Three Fingers is dead and buried.
I think the demand is there, I got to be honest with you. I mean, they've done so well with 7 films, or 6 or 7 films, that they've got that small little fan base. It's like the Children of the Corn, like you said. I mean, there's another film coming out of that now, another sequel coming out. So, I don't think it's the last we spend time in those woods, let me tell you.
All right, well, let's make a long-term bet here, folks. 5 years from now, when I'm sure we'll still be doing this podcast, we'll see. We'll see if there's another wrong turn that follows the original continuity or not. Maybe there will be. I'd sort of like to, if there is, despite everything I've just said. If there is, I will still watch it.
Same as me. I would be the first one in the queue to watch Wrong Turn 12.
So what else have you been watching except Wrong Turn?
Well, it's mostly TV shows virtually. I binge watched the whole of You Honor starring Bryan Cranston. Being such a diehard Breaking Bad fan, I'd watch anything with this guy in. And a concept of a family man breaking the law for his family may have shades of Walter White, but it's a decent few hours of your life and it's got a little payoff towards the end. Other than that, these new single episodes of The Walking Dead's new season is just not working whatsoever. I don't know if you watched them, Jim.
Not yet, because it's not very long. We're waiting for the whole thing to have aired, and then we're just going to binge it then.
They're doing standalone stories now.
Yeah, I mean, they are very COVID restricted, but it's just so boring. And I'm really looking forward to next week's one personally, because it's got the Negan prequel, which shows him before, with his wife in real life, which sounds good. But honestly, it's not moving the plot forward as the last 3 episodes. It's very, very dull. And the Daryl and Carol one, if that's the future of The Walking Dead, because they're doing a spin-off of them on the road, then it doesn't bode well, because it was such a boring 45 minutes of my life, and I wouldn't recommend it to anyone. But apart from that, Snowpiercer is still the most underrated show on TV on Netflix. It's honestly, it's fantastic. It's coming towards the end of season 2, which I recommend to anyone to watch. But what I've started doing, for some strange reason, I've got this urge to watch film franchises, from back to back for some strange reason. So I started yesterday with Rise, Dawn, and War of the Planet of the Apes.
Nice.
Now, the first 2 are just stunning films, aren't they? Perhaps even better than the Charlton Heston classic, even though I still feel that War is the weakest of them all. But it does bode well into what Matt Reeves can bring to the world of Gotham with the new Batman flick.
I reckon the second one, Dawn, that is probably one of the best action films of this millennium.
Yes, I agree with you.
Absolutely fantastic. And there's something like what I liked about War. I thought the first was the weakest one. I think the good thing about War for me is I liked seeing it was rewarding seeing Caesar's arc getting complete. It was a really good character journey that was running through all 3 of those films, and I think it was a really nice payoff by the end.
I think War lost me, with no spoilers, with what Woody Harrelson done at the beginning of the War film. To impact Caesar's life. That film lost me from that moment, because I just thought it was a bit needless. I don't know why. I just thought, I even watched it for the second time yesterday, I was still angry with it. Maybe that's the reaction the director and the writer wanted from everywhere. But I just didn't like it. Caesar's been through so much. I just thought it was a needless act to put into the plot.
It's interesting having the humans as being unambiguously the bad guys in it, right? As an audience, when we're watching it, we're like, yeah, kick the shit out of the humans. We're rooting for the apes.
Yeah, only the once when it first aired at the cinema. It was good. I liked the way it tied into the continuity of the original films, with the humans slowly losing the ability to speak. And then, once the last of humanity is wiped out, they then go on to, settle elsewhere. That was really good. But I did feel it maybe went on a bit with that last film. But overall, it's a very entertaining series. Definitely as good as the original film.
So when you say it blends into the original films, do you mean the Charlton Heston classic, or do you mean the Mark Wahlberg one?
Depends which timeline you're on, I suppose.
Exactly. Oh God! Can anyone explain to me that ending of the Mark Wahlberg Tim Burton one? To this day, I don't get it. Flipping heck.
I understand it, but the fact that it's not explained in the film kind of, it's just. It's like a lot of the time I'm fine with films letting you figure stuff out for yourself, but that was just a bit too much.
I know. I just sat there thinking, what? Explain that to me. And I don't think there was any Google then to look back on. Stupid film.
I remember a few years back, me and a flatmate were in the pub. It was one of David's laws of pubs is if your pub has no windows, it's not a good pub. And we were in this pub. And they had a Planet, it was just our local, they had a Planet of the Apes Mark Wahlberg one playing on the screen. And there was this family sat in front of the telly watching it, right? Me and my family were like, we're watching Planet of the Apes, Mark Wahlberg one. We started speaking to each other. Then one of the guys turns around and goes, shh, and then turns around and continues watching the film. It's fucking baffling. And he had his kids with him there and everything.
Oh my God!
Nice. I can send him a trip to go to a pub in the afternoon to watch Mark Wahlberg Planet of the Apes.
Oh God! I don't think I've only ever seen that once, and I might watch it again now because I watched these 2 films. I got to be honest with you. I think it's actually on Disney Plus, isn't it? So I might watch it on the weekend.
As horror fans, it's one of those things we do to ourselves. When you start watching a franchise, you go, "I'm going to have to watch the remainder of these." And then it's like you're at like the 6th Amityville Horror and going, why? It's like digging your own mass grave.
As long as you got to the Amityville Horror Part 6 and not Amityville Vibrator, which is Part 54.
I think it's like it is digging your own mass grave because as long as fans keep on watching these, we're going to have more of them made because you go, well, these are popular. Just say no at some point.
Oh God.
Lately, I've been watching The Dark and the Wicked, which is by the same director as The Strangers. And like The Strangers, it's a very intimate, close quarters horror. Although this one's more kind of supernatural. But while there's some really good, really uncomfortable bits, it's really, really forgettable. I watched it like last week. And most of the third act is just gone to me right now. I know that I enjoyed it while I saw it, but it was quite generic. In a way that was surprisingly so because it's getting a lot of really good hype on Twitter. And I also watched Synchronic the other night. Technically, there's an embargo on this film, but by the time this goes live, the embargo should be lifted. Synchronic's a new sci-fi thriller from Justin Benson and Aaron Moorhead. The guys who did Spring and The Endless. Like The Endless, there's a really good idea to this film, but it takes way too long to get there. And then once it does get there finally, it goes into a very sci-fi territory. Like at first you'll be thinking you're watching a horror film, a lot of gory dead bodies show up, but it's very much a sci-fi one. The problem is, once it gets going, it just gets swamped down in exposition where it starts looking at its rules and stuff like this, and like, here's what happens if you do that. So the second half just gets dominated by Anthony Mackie, who's very good in it, plays a good character, but it's just a lot of him just doing this kind of exposition. Like for the plot, there's a lot of show don't tell, and then because this is dominating a 2-hour movie, then for the characters, a lot of it gets rushed. There's a lot of tell, don't show for the characters. Where, Anthony Mackie's entire backing story is really awkwardly communicated by the 50 Shades of Grey actor, whose name suddenly is forgotten, speaking to his wife about Anthony Mackie's tragic backing story, which is all about Hurricane Katrina. And, I just thought there's such potential here, just like the other films is seen by the same team. There's such potential, but it's just kind of lost in this kind of mumblecore stuff that they seem to specialise in. I'd like to be wrong. Maybe at some point Justin Benson and Darren Moorhead will make a great film, but at the moment they just kind of seem a bit like the most overrated names in horror since Adam Wingard kicked off. So yeah, Synchronic, good, but not They've not made their masterpiece yet.
I think that, like you quite rightly said, they've got such a high reputation, haven't they, these two directors? I mean, the film world actually loves them, but I don't think they appeal much to the audience out there. Where the critics lavish the praise, the films actually leave the fans cold. I enjoyed Spring, which was a pretty good, decent spin on the vampire's tale. But Endless, well, the title summed it up because it seemed like endless. They didn't finish, But I haven't seen the new one, and the reasons why you just explained.
Jamie Dornan was, of course, the name of the guy from 50 Shades of Grey.
50 Shades of Grey.
I quite liked their one After Midnight that came out last year. They were producers on it, and it's very much in their kind of lo-fi genre style, of like a lo-fi take on like a high concept. But that was quite good, although, maybe they didn't write or direct it, but it's got their DNA all over it. That made me think, maybe these guys could do something that I really warm to eventually. Before we move on, by the way, I believe you've got some news you were wishing to share, Ross.
Well, some shocking news. Dust down your Bon Jovi CD as we go in all blaze of glory. As it seems, Emilio Estevez is set to bring back the Young Guns for the third and final time. To complete a trilogy of films started way back in 1988. Now, I adored the original as a kid, but as Estevez played Billy the Kid, and there's rumours of all the old gang returning, shall we call this Middle-Aged Guns, with Billy the Old Man leading the charge?
Oh, I see what you did there.
That's good, isn't it? That's good.
Jim, I saw you do a wee air punch. You're big on your Young Guns.
Oh, man, when I was a kid, I absolutely loved them films. I'd take them off the telly and watch them all the time. I mean, even now, I love them. So I don't care what it's going to be like. I will be there day one.
I think it's a bit like the other bit of news of a Face Off 2 sequel. I know, you can get excited, but personally, I think it's a bit too late of an entry for fans to get really excited about. And I think maybe both films are hoping to live off its no doubt high reputation.
But at least with it being a Western that has got a lot of ground it can cover, so it's not entirely a niche thing like Face Off was as a comparison.
But then Young Guns 2 end the storyline.
Oh, the first one did as well.
True. Horror news. Fiona Dorff is reprising her role as Nika for the much-anticipated Chucky TV show, which I'm really looking forward to. And Darwin Lynn Bosman is begging Lionsgate to let him make a Leprechaun sequel.
Yeah, I've been reading a lot of chatter about that on Twitter, to be fair. Which, considering how low budget and pretty much all of them have been straight to DVD, I can't see why not.
I just don't understand why Lionsgate haven't given the money for it. Here's a quality, talented director, and I don't know. I actually enjoyed Leprechaun Returns, though. The last one. I thought it was pretty good.
Why don't you just let him? I mean, he's Darren Lynn Bosan's a perfectly competent director. He's made far bigger films than any of the Leprechaun sequels. He's kind of got a good sort of sense of playfulness about him. Frankly, I think he'd be great for a series. I don't think it's a great series, but I'd watch one of his films in it.
Leprechaun Returns is good, though. That was a pretty good sequel, the last one. Due to him seeing it. Yeah, it was good. You haven't seen it?
No, I've not watched any of them since Leprechaun of the Hood.
So you guys talked about Shark of the Corn in the last podcast, but you haven't seen Leprechaun Returns. Sorry, before we start on that, because I missed last time, and Steph will no doubt come back for our next podcast and state she has watched Sharks of the Corn and an episode of probably Changing Rooms with Carol Smiley.
She's complex. She's a maverick. The rest of us are stuck in our little boxes. She's way outside the box for Emmerdale and stuff like that.
But I was listening last time, and the thought came into my head: how pissed off would you be if you were, say, Scott Glossman, who has been waiting for years and years to make Behind the Mask 2, the Leslie Vernon slasher, which is one of the best stunning piece of horrors that fans have demanded for years for the sequel. Now, can you picture the scene, right, Scott? Yes, I would love to make Behind the Mask 2, and I do have a fan base that means this will be quite successful on release. Studio executive, unsure about that. What else have we got? filmmaker, I have an idea. I want to sort of remake Children of the Corn, but instead of children, I want to put sharks in a cornfield. Studio executive, wow, here's the money. Go and make it now, son. Come on, man. Do you know what I mean?
It'd be almost as pissed off as if you spent yonks doing CGI on very elaborate action sequences or building a set of a temple and they get cut out because of reshoots. But we'll be coming towards that.
Yes.
In a wee bit.
And that's it for the news.
Folks, we've got a shitload to go through here. What I thought we'd be doing is going through the films that come before Justice League from the DC Extended Universe. Now, we're not going to be mentioning anything before Man of Steel, but there's a ton of DC out there. You know, if you're looking at the old Richard Donner Supermans, you've got your Burton, Schumacher, and Nolan Batman films. Heck, we even have Shaquille O'Neal made a DC film called Steel. So, like, you know, there's a lot of DC films out there, but we don't really have time to go through like all 40 of them or so. And have you guys got a favourite DC film though before we reach the new incarnations?
Mine will definitely be one of the Batman films, but the majority are all great. So to pick one, it would be tough, but I think The Dark Knight would probably just edge out the others.
Batman Begins, I was also big on. Far less of a fan of The Dark Knight Rises than either of the other two. I just thought like we have to watch the arc of Batman has to become Batman twice in the course of the movie. It just seemed pointless. I was getting quite into Bane as just being like a radical commie where he's like, oh, let's all storm Wall Street, right? I was like, part of me was like, yeah, go, you know, he's representing the 99% movement, right? But then Bane's going, oh, okay, so, you know, now we've started this people's revolution and taken over Gotham. It turns out that I know there's a bomb under the city, the bomb's going to blow up the entire of Gotham. So you're like, okay, you have why would you draw attention to yourself like this, right? And secondly, it's like, you lost the idea that Bane is a true believer. You know, it became all about Bane is doing this to impress a girl. A plan that will result in his inevitable death. So it's not a particularly adaptive mating strategy that Bane's pursuing here. It's a very high risk one. So yeah, I didn't like that. I just disappointed. You know, I want a bad guy to be the good guy in their own head. You know,
yeah,
or just to be completely rage like the Joker, where, you know, it's not really a motivation there. You know, that I'm fine with as well. But I just sort of thought with Bane, you know, you have this. Yeah, I like the idea of someone who's got an ideological point. You know, like throughout it, we've got Catwoman saying like, all right, you know, these sort of greedy bastards like Bruce Wayne, you know, we're leaving absolutely nothing for the rest of us. And then come the end of the movie, you know, they're like, oh, by the way, all that stuff about you leaving nothing for the rest of us? Oh, bullshit. We're actually just trying to do distraction when we blow up the city.
It was a weekend then as well, wasn't it? I mean, he flew off in the bomb and he's supposed to have died in that stupid scene with Michael Caine at the end looking across the coffee table, which is a bit like Inception. Was he really there? You know, was Michael Caine imagining it? It was a really disappointing ending to what was, a really good first two films.
Yeah, that bit aside, I quite like the little false setup with Robin at the end there. That left it on a nice little note for me.
Which we'll never get to see.
No, but there's always your imagination.
Yes. We might get a cut of that, you know, the Robin cut in 10 years' time. I think for me, again, it's a Batman film, but I was lucky enough to have lived through 1989 with Batman, you know, Michael Keaton, Tim Burton. Unless you lived in that year, I don't think you appreciate how massive that film was. It was absolutely everywhere.
I can remember the hype for that. I mean, I couldn't have been much older than 6 or 7, but you couldn't escape it. It was huge, wasn't it?
You could have Batman haircuts, which I did. I had the Batman symbol at the back of my head, which, you know, I thought I looked absolutely wicked, but looking back, I probably looked like a brat. But, you know, what Tim Burton done with that film, and Michael Keaton is so good in the role. All my memory of course, The Dark Knight was Adam West, you know, kapow, boom, you know, the fighting off a rubber shock, you know, and getting the bat repellent spray. But Michael Keaton just took that to another level, and it's such a fantastic film. It's not the best Batman film. I think arguably you could say, and The Mask of the Phantasm, which is an animated Batman film, which was, that's well considered as one of the best Batman films of all time. And I know we're not going to go back into the back catalogue, but what I will say is, even though Marvel has probably nailed the live action, DC has absolutely got the animated the world to perfection. There are some films out there which deserve an audience. They really do.
I think the one that I grew up on was, I grew up with a VHS of 1980s Superman 2, which I thought was, at the time, was the absolute bomb. And then, when you see Zod in Man of Steel, I was like, oh, I liked the sort of kind of like Bee Gees version of Zod a lot better than this one, It's a good movie. I mean, we'll go back and watch it nowadays. Some of it's a bit silly. Like, it's weird seeing Marlon Brando in it at all. The bit where he hitchhikes back from the North Pole, for some goof. But, it's a really good action film. It's so hopeful and optimistic, which I think those early ones were, And, probably the weakest of that lot would be Superman 4, The Quest for Peace, where, part of me sort of loves it as well. Like, the whole concept of Nuclear Man as a bad guy, for Nuclear Man, he's got all the same powers as Superman, but he can't move when the sun's rays aren't upon him. You're like, well, he's fucking useless, man. It's difficult to generate tension in a Superman film. And they're saying, okay, he's got all Superman's powers. Good. So did Zod. But he beat up Zod for all Superman's powers, every bit as hard as Superman, but you can't move from the majority of the 24-hour cycle during the winter, right? And you're going, okay. Doesn't Superman put him in a cupboard at one point, and then he just ceases to move? Then he takes a cupboard up to the moon or something like that. It's a major weak point. Normally, don't be wrong, Nuclear Man could beat the shit out of me, right? But at the same time, if I had all his powers, but I could move anytime I wanted, right, then I could beat the shit out of him. You lose your tension. Yeah, what have you guys got a particular, not including the new ones, a particular low point in the DC universe?
I'm still go back to Superman 4. I still can't understand, after all these 30 odd years, how Superman built the Wall of China. Rebuilt the Wall of China by using his eyes. That just baffles me. But the low point for me, of course, was Batman versus Robin. Batman and Robin, the Joel Schumacher. Oh my good gracious me. The Bat card, the Bat nipples. Oh, please make it stop. Flipping heck. I think the only person that film who seemed to be having a good time was Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yeah, that was an absolute mess. That, and it's unfortunately Batman Forever was at least a star better.
I just didn't buy Val Kilmer. I just thought that he's better than George Clooney. I mean, anyone in Gotham would know that George Clooney was Batman and Bruce Wayne. Because he was a one note winner. He didn't change his voice, nothing at all. I mean, he was actually Bruce Wayne walking around in a Batman suit. But Val Kilmer was he was terrible as Batman as well. Coming from Michael Keaton to him, that put me off straight away. But Jim Carrey's good in it, and Tommy Lee Jones's good in it as well. It's always the bad guys in the old versions are better than they had really good bad guys, didn't they? You had the Penguin, you had Catwoman, the Riddler, Harvey Two-Face, really good bad guys.
For me, Batman Forever is probably the worst one. I've never been able to watch it all the way through. I just can't sit through it. It's so aggravating. Batman and Robin, I actually enjoy. I would say it's a bit of a guilty pleasure. It's really camp and probably terrible as a Batman, but as a film, it's silly fun. But I just cannot stand Batman Forever. The amount of times I've tried to watch it.
What was so bad about it for you?
It's just so great. I mean, Jim Carrey, I normally don't mind, but he really gets to me in that film. It's just so annoying. And I know that's his thing. And yeah, even Tommy Lee Jones. I mean, Ross enjoyed him, but I thought he was awful. He's constantly laughing all the time, and probably laughing at us watching it, to be fair.
He was channeling Jack Nicholson's Joker a bit. I do agree with you.
There is one anecdote about that film, though. I don't know if it's true or not, but apparently on set, Tommy Lee Jones walked up to Jim Carrey and just said to him, "I cannot sanction your buffoonery." And that was it.
Steel When you first heard they were bringing back Superman and making him dark, what did you guys think?
Following the Nolan Batman films, I was really up for it. I mean, I thought those three films were fantastic, and it's probably what really got me into the character and further DC characters in the big way that I like them these days. Yeah, I was really, really excited for it.
Yeah, how about yourself, Ross?
Yeah, same here. I thought, after the Batman films, I thought, yeah, here we go. Christopher Nolan was an executive producer as well. Zack Snyder was coming in on the back of 300. I thought, this is going to be a good film, and especially after Superman Returns, which was quite a disappointment. If that played more like a love letter to the Richard Donner films, forgetting to actually stand on his own 2 feet. You had a borderline Superman stalker in that film. I was always uncomfortable with him scanning the house with Lois Lane inside. I thought, what's going on behind? It's borderline. It's like a Brightburn film for the second. But so I was interested in how the direction would go, and I thought the casting of Henry was a good one. And yeah, I was quite intrigued. I was really excited for when it came out.
I completely forgot that Superman Returns existed until you mentioned it there.
It's easy to.
Yeah, I didn't think it was too bad. I actually quite enjoyed it.
Yeah, I really liked Brandon Routh as Superman as well. I thought he was cracking, but I'm with Ross. I just don't like it.
I mean, I think part of the problem with it was it did the same thing that Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3D did, or Texas Chainsaw, sorry, to give it its proper name, where they try and say it's a direct sequel, but the timeline doesn't make any sense.
No.
And that always strikes me as really cynical when we do that. It's like, if it is going to be a direct sequel, just set it in the 1980s,
I just didn't buy Kate Bosworth as Lois Lane. If she was supposed to be the Margaret Kidder character, then I thought she was too nice to be in that role. And I also didn't buy the massive plot hole that she was pregnant. I mean, if this is following from Superman 2, when Superman 2 kissed her and her memory goes, and then Superman disappears for 10 years or whatever, and she finds out she's pregnant, at what time in her life did she question, when did I have sex with Superman?
That's a very good point. Never thought of that. I quite liked the whole bit of the end, where he's like lifting the island. I like to think that certain Mr. Whedon saw that and then thought, maybe I can make the Avengers do this at a later date.
Yeah, true. But Jim's right though. Brandon is brilliant in it. He's absolutely really good, and I'm glad he managed to reprise the role later on in the Flash TV show. But yeah, it was too much of a love letter, and he actually forgot to be his own film. But there is some good elements in it. Kevin Spacey as Lex Luthor was pretty good as well. But it's a forgettable and bland film. Just like you said, David, you've totally forgot about it.
Whereas I suppose with Man of Steel is it's a difficult movie to feel indifferent to. Like, personally, I really hated Man of Steel. I thought it was so joyless. And its overly serious tone meant that the coincidences the plot relied upon were really, really glaring. For instance, Lois reaching the Fortress of Solitude at the same time that Kal-El did, right? And you could let a sillier film get away with that because you go, well, it's just it's a comic, it's doing a kind of comic thing, it's okay, it's an adventure. Whereas because this took itself so seriously, I couldn't look past that. I think the serious tone of it is really unusual because Superman's usually here's your symbol of hope, right? And they're going, nah, tell you what, we're going to make him a flying Batman, basically. Where I will give the movie credit is from the get-go, they established world-threatening stakes. There's an apocalyptic scale that they achieve quite convincingly by the end of the film, with when Zod comes down. But I thought Zod shouldn't have been the bad guy in the piece, on the grounds that, just in terms of his motivation, for me, his motivation was actually quite a noble motivation. But then they had to sort of force this weird position where he suddenly goes, oh, I'm just going to kill all the humans as well, Rather, it's not about trying to preserve the... they're not called kryptonites. What are they all called from Krypton?
Kryptonians.
Kryptonians, that's the one, yes. He's like, oh yeah, we need to preserve the Kryptonians, and it's like, Superman's dad is like, fuck that, right? I'm going to give the codex to my son and send him into space. Like, I think there was quite a kind of a noble cause on Zod's side, but he even just ended up becoming the cartoon villain by the end of it. Is anyone else pro Zod?
I guess the beginning sets him up to be, kind of single-minded in his view of how the way things should be run. I mean, it's a good 20 or so minutes that we establish what's happening on Krypton and why it's coming to its end and so on. So I think that by that point, it does show you that he is just got the one goal in mind, trying to preserve the way Krypton's run. And obviously, you've got Jor-El, who thinks that it should be more like an Earth society, really.
His thing's more of it, we've had our chance, we've got to let ourselves die out, he says at one point. Like, he's basically wishing for the death of his own people.
I took it from the way they lived as opposed to, their actual people, because everything's predetermined, isn't it? Even before the children are grown or whatever it is they do with those Genesis chambers, everything's predetermined. They're assigned their life, and in their complacency is basically what's brought them to their demise. So that's why he sends him elsewhere to hopefully get the Kryptonian people eventually on a better path, I suppose, which is why he's got the codex with him, isn't he? That's just how I interpret it anyway. And for what it's worth, Man of Steel is probably my favourite Superman film as well.
Well, of all time, or?
Yeah, out of all of them, yeah.
I just did a pin drop.
Is it that you're such a fan of with Man of Steel?
It probably is its more serious tone. I just, as much as I like the original Christopher Reeve one, they're probably just a bit too bubblegum for me. A bit too happy and shiny. I think I prefer, the what if Superman was around today. How would people react to that? How would governments react? Because in the, the original films, probably in the comics and that as well, everyone's like, oh, all right, yeah, cool. It's, he's going to be by our side and always helping us. But yeah, like in Man of Steel, it's, there's always a what if. What if he turns against us? What if he isn't the good guy? And I do like that approach to it. I find it more interesting for a start.
How about yourself, Ross? Were you much of a fan of Man of Steel?
I thought it was a good starting ground for what should have followed. It put the stepping stones in place for a good little bright future. I like the fact, of course, that it, like I said, it was different to the last film. Zack Snyder clearly thought, let's go for it. There's massive plot holes, like it is in many of the films it's going to follow. But I think the biggest problem for Man of Steel is that they didn't have a Man of Steel 2. I think that is the biggest complaint I got of the film because of DC's need to rush these things, where they should have done a Man of Steel, then maybe a Batman film with Ben Affleck, and then a Man of Steel 2 to give Henry Cavill's a chance to grow as Superman. I think that there was it was all in place. There was some really good action scenes. Obviously, you're on about Zod is no Terrence Stamp. Sorry, Jim, but there's only one Zod in my eyes, and yeah, I quite enjoy it for what it is. I mean, it's a 3 stars for me, no matter what. And I just thought, yeah, it was room there for it to grow.
I agree on the fact that we should have had more of these characters before they decided to go for the big super team up, because I really, really like Henry Cavill as Superman. I think he is the best person to wear the cape, and I would have liked to have seen a lot more of him before his fleeting glimpse in the Justice League.
I think what Snyder done well was he established the characters. He got rid of the origin tale. He cast some brilliant people in these roles. You could, from watching this back then, you could taste the excitement of what was going to follow. what could have come.
Yeah.
The difficult part is, they somehow made everyone believe that a man can fly again, but also a new Superman can exist apart from the Donner version. And all they had to do was make sure that the next film leapt over tall buildings with a single bounce, And sadly, they just didn't do that.
I think something I would have liked to see more of was the life of Superman in it. There was a lot of stuff at the beginning that I think could have been significantly reduced, and I think the last section could have been significantly reduced as well, because when the final fight starts, we've still got 40 minutes of the movie left, right? And I think there's a lot of bits where you see interesting ideas, hey, what if Superman was at school, right? You've got all these scenes that I think show a potential that's just not quite there. It hangs together almost like a greatest hits package, or in fact, not like a greatest hits package. When TV shows do those episodes that are clip shows, I think a lot of Man of Steel watched like that, where it's oh, I remember a time that this happened, and you've got a flashback, but I'm okay, it doesn't add up to anything coherent here, it doesn't add up to something whole. With and with the last fight, it was quite impressive. As I said, I applaud it for having an apocalyptic scale already, and I do applaud it for the taking the time to show that people are scared shitless, which is a nice contrast to Marvel, who don't. But at the same time, it did start to resemble the Peter fights for chicken bits from Family Guy. Just how relentless it all was.
The problem was with the Man of Steel is, and it's probably for any future Superman films, is the fact that it suffers from the viewer knowing way too much of the character and the storyline. It's hard to even offer anything new now to the table when the whole legacy of Superman is built in our brain. And what Snyder done was he made a film which was loud with sheer bangs, which was not as good as the 1978 original, but is probably a much better spectacle.
I'll give it this: Hans Zimmer's soundtrack was amazing.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. That I think that is probably part of the reason why it's my favourite. Every time I watch it, that is probably 50% of what is keeping me hooked whilst I'm watching it. It probably gives it a whole extra star.
I think something that all of these DC films do show, whether it's through their successes or their failures, is the importance of presentation. Where you have a good composer, where you have appropriate use or inappropriate use of slow motion, where you have a filter on your action. And I think for that one, I find it hollow, but technically it was really impressive. I feel that about quite a few of these. That'll be a recurring motif. Let's move on, though, to Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. Oh, when you guys heard that Batman and Superman would be coming together to duke it out, what did you think?
Well, being a massive Batman fan at this point, it was pretty much a dream come true. I was absolutely chomping at the bit to see this film. And the more trailers that were released, the more info we got about it, the more it was looking brilliant. Wonder Woman was added to it. We saw Doomsday was going to be there. Obviously, we've got Lex Luthor in there as well. I mean, everything seemed to be coming together to be this potentially perfect film, from my point of view at least. But, I'm not going to deny I was initially disappointed by it, but that's not to say I didn't enjoy it. I still think it's a genuinely good film, and as time's gone on, I actually like it a bit more than I did when I first saw it. But yeah, coming out of the cinema, there was a bit of heavy-heartedness. There's no denying it was messy, but especially the final 30, 40 minutes. As great as it is having Wonder Woman join the fray and kicking ass with the rest of them, they were just fighting a big orc, basically. So, Doomsday was quite a disappointing villain, really. Just a bit of a CGI mess. But up to that point, I did enjoy most of it. I don't think there was enough Batman in it. There's lots of Bruce Wayne, which is fine. And Ben Affleck really suits the role, if you ask me. I think he's just as good as anyone else who's taken it on.
Oh, 100%. I think he's great.
But there wasn't enough Batman for me. The best we got was towards the just before the big dust-up with Doomsday, where he's saving Martha. He's in that warehouse taking out all the villains, and that was beautiful. It just reminded me of playing the Arkham Asylum games. It was great the way he picks them all off and bursts through the wall, that sort of thing. I loved that. For me, you can't have it throughout the entirety of the film, but I would have liked to have seen a little bit more of that side of the Dark Knight.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely fair. I reckon like when I first heard about it, I'm more of a Batman fan than a Superman fan, and so I thought, all right, that's cool. And then you hear, okay, well, Affleck's going to be Batman. Struck me as good casting, and absolutely fair play to good old Batfleck. He does both the parts of Bruce Wayne and Batman very well, unlike, say, with Christian Bale, where, I think you got probably with Christian Bale a stronger Bruce Wayne than you do a Batman. I'd say that Michael Keaton's the opposite, where Michael Keaton, I think, excels as Bruce, but I find him less convincing as Batman. What about yourself, Ross? What did you make of Batman versus Superman?
Well, when I found out that there was going to be a Batman versus Superman film, obviously I was very, very excited, and I wanted to be there, the first in the queue on opening night, which I was. I went to the midnight showing, and it's probably one of the most strangest atmospheres I've ever witnessed.
Were people dressed up?
It was. I listened to those queuing up, and it seemed everyone had heard of the bad reviews. I mean, it was during the week it started filtering through, and I was getting some really, really bad, press. And I was quite excited when I was walking in there. I try to ignore any reviews if I watch a film, so I like to make my own personal judgment. I was absolutely delighted when Ben Affleck was announced as Batman, even though I expected Matt Damon to turn up as Robin in some parts. I remember sitting in that queue. I'm going in that queue. I even joined in by choosing a Batman cup of Coke instead of the Man of Steel cup, and getting into a small little argument of who's the best, superhero. But, man, I really don't like this film. I honestly don't. And I apologize to all DC fans. One of the things I said to my mate when I went to see it, I hope we do not see Batman's parents die again. We do not need that scene. And of course, and he said, what happens if it does? I said, well, maybe I'm going to leave. And 10 minutes in, 5 minutes in, what do we have? We have that scene again, and we have that ridiculous moment where young Bruce Wayne is floating up the bat to carrying him up. That imagery, and I knew from that moment that this film is going to be an absolute disaster.
You couldn't accuse Snyder of being a subtle filmmaker.
But you don't. I know, but maybe Snyder's, especially towards Batman, so much his imagery wouldn't work because Batman's supposed to be dark and gritty.
Something quite a nice little in-joke that I enjoy is, in Watchmen, where you've got the beginning, the times they are a changing song, right? And in that bit, you have an attempted murder on Batman's parents being stopped. And I thought that was cool.
Yes, yeah.
It worked hard to find a credible reason for Batman and Superman to be fighting. And I think the disagreement they had was good. You've got Batman's got a very good reason to think, all right, well, what if this guy loses it one day? What if this guy kills us all? He's already caused severe collateral damage in a war that, essentially he brought to the planet, right? And then you go, okay, well, he's got a personal stake in this. People for his team died. He knew people who died in that. And then, you've got all the politicians are scared of Superman. So I quite enjoyed that from Batman's perspective. It totally made sense that he would hate this guy. And this, I guess, it's the kind of dynamic that Marvel's been working with for a bit as well. Where you have with the Hulk in Age of Ultron, and also with Wanda as well. Is it okay to in Iron Man 3, Captain America 3? the sort of thing of, is it okay to have these people that potentially could destroy tons of buildings, kill lots of people if they just lose it one day, Like with Wanda, you've basically got a nuclear weapon in a dress, right? And with Batman versus Superman, Batman's like, all right, well, here's a nuclear weapon in tights, I was totally on board with that. And also, like, Superman sort of thing of like, who fucked is this guy thing he is, It worked very well to build up their fight. And then when they do fight, it was over too quickly. Lots and lots of foreplay. The fights last about 5 minutes, and then you've got the silly Martha bit, which, we don't really need to say too much on that. That's a strange thing that makes Batman suddenly reconsider his entire philosophy towards crime.
Yeah, I guess that's why they did those opening credits. I mean, everyone knows Batman's deal about his parents at this point. I'm guessing that's why they're reiterating it over these little dream sequences in the opening credits, just to make that probably seem a little less goofy. But I don't think there's any patching over that. But what strikes me, I think the worst part for the film for me is it's everything up until the Martha part is all premeditated by Lex Luthor. Literally every little, card in this house of cards has been placed there by Luthor. He has orchestrated the whole thing down to the smallest detail. And I know he's meant to be some really super intelligent villain, but that's one of the things that just didn't kind of sit well with me. Everything's too convenient. But for the most part, what I did see of it, I enjoyed. And going back to Batman being, on the back foot with Superman, that is probably one of my favorite little plots I've seen in many different DC properties. Always having a contingency plan just in case he does do the worst. Like you've got that little dream sequence with the Nightmare Batman, where you've got the post-apocalyptic wasteland. There's two sides, obviously, Superman and then the little band of rebels which Batman's with. That was really good. I would have loved to have seen more of that, to be fair. But yeah, everything about that little aspect of those two I find great, but it just was a bit too sloppy getting to it, really.
I just think in this film, Ben Affleck nails the role. There's bit part of that film where, especially when in the fight scenes towards the end, when he's fighting all the bad guys, that it actually feels like, the Rockstar video games, that kind of imagery.
Yeah, with the Batmobile as well. Yeah, that was
brilliant, honestly. And I was swept away by that. And I was thinking, yeah, it's a big, massive scope. But I just think the entire film is badly written. One, we needed a Man of Steel 2 beforehand because we've gone from Lois and Clark just getting to know each other. Then this film, they're sharing a bath. I mean, where's this plot development come from? And I just think Batman is so badly written. I mean, you got some scenes where he's conflicted. He's either in a stage of his life where he has lost everyone around him and is now disregarding his own values, which would have been fine. But there's some scenes he's more assertive and still shows he cares. The film can't have it both ways. Mm-hmm. Having a conflicted and world-weary Batman who apparently has lost his Robin would have been fine and may have taken us and the viewer in a whole new direction. But when it comes to actually trying to defeat Batman, he then suddenly shows us compassion. And by the end of the film, he's trying to set up a Justice League. I mean, considering he spent the majority of the film branding his victims, which makes him more vigilante, and was probably losing the support of long-term ally Jim Gordon, the sudden change in the last act does not make any sense whatsoever. And if it's because of that, and if it's because of the Martha moment, then it's even more ridiculous. But I will say, and he gets a lot of criticism, is Jesse Eisenberg as Lex Luthor. I think he's good in this.
I like that he's just so out of sync with everyone else.
He plays it differently. He's good, but again, he's badly written. Because he's behind the scenes, which is great, but it's the overall concept of his evil master plan. And this is a guy who's supposed to be very intelligent. Doesn't make any sense, right? Now, Lex wanted Batman to kill Superman. But why? Did he really need Batman to get involved? Did he want them both to kill each other? Now, we know that Batman was closed in on his dirty deeds, but did Lex actually know that? You know, the trouble we have as the audience is that we such in the dark over the general scheme of things. It's like all we need to know was Lex wants them to fight. But why?
See, I agree with you on that. I guess I went with the idea that he probably thought, all right, well, you know, worst case scenario, one of them kills the other. Best case scenario, they both kill each other. The thing that I didn't get was what he possibly wanted to do with Doomsday.
Well, exactly. You know, Lex had the kryptonite and the knowledge that he could hurt Superman. So why did he need Batman? Bringing the Cape Crusader into this just results in his own downfall.
Surely he thought that what would happen. Surely he must have thought that Superman was more likely to batter Batman.
Yeah, but by getting rid, but then he creates Doomsday. So by getting rid of one unstoppable foe, he creates another. What's this, Megamind?
Yeah, no, that was 4D chess, that was.
So if Batman had killed Superman, then how would have Lex controlled his creation? You know, he couldn't have, which demonstrates why having such a brilliant comic book creation as an afterthought is just a waste of time, much like the treatment Bane was given in Batman and Robin.
Yeah, it's just, I think a lot of it's probably down to fan service at the end of the day, isn't it? But we did get Wonder Woman. So
yeah, that was
not all bad.
That was cool as hell. Her entrance with the Wonder Woman theme playing in the background.
Yeah, it got me hyped. I mean, as you say, what an introduction! Like jumping down with his shield, stopping Batman basically getting annihilated, and then you got that amazing like riff over the top, which it turns out is actually played on cello.
Oh,
using
shit.
pedals. Yeah.
Right.
And yeah, I think if you've got one major plus point to come out of that is the excellent Wonder Woman theme.
This is absolutely true.
That was probably the best part of the film. But before we go off to another one, let me just say, I found a bit of my notes. Why did everyone think Superman killed all those bad guys in Africa? I mean, they were all shot. Does it look like Superman needs a gun? Right?
Yeah.
It seems that nobody really trusts Superman. So why did they build him a frigging statue?
They had to appease him. They thought if we're nice to him. Because I think the thing is, this film could have just been called Rorschach versus Dr. Manhattan with the way that the characterization was done in it, you know? And Superman was basically just, you know, he's apathetic, he's everyone's suspicious of him, you know, he's kind of above the whole thing.
At least there was less free-hanging junk if it was Dr. Manhattan. So.
But it's like Wonder Woman, yeah, it's a revival, and that scene, the final fight is brilliant. It is one of the best. That was highlight at 3:00 in the morning in the cinema when 55 people already left by then, and me and my mate are sad and still sitting there. But why is Wonder Woman so concerned about a photo? No one knows her. You know, would anyone have joined the dots by looking at an old photo and seeing someone who looks like her? Her own presence around the place brings the much unwanted attention. You know, there was no need for her to be in this movie. None whatsoever.
No, I've got to say, I didn't even realise that was Chris Pine and Ewan Bremner in there until the Wonder Woman film.
But the final thing that nails it for me, and the most silliest, stupidest moment ever in comic book film history, is since when is Gotham and where Superman lives so close together? I mean, there's a river separating, you know, the Daily Planet and Gotham.
Yeah, that pissed me off.
It's very convenient, isn't it? I mean, I'm not really hot on my DC geography, but yeah, that was way too convenient.
Well, surely Superman can fly, see the bat signal, so we go and help. They would have met.
Something I was saying earlier about the serious tone, in some ways, making it seem sillier, is why nobody recognises Superman when he's got his glasses off. Because in the older ones, it's fine. I'm willing to buy the reality that people just simply don't realise it because Clark Kent's a buffoon. Whereas Clark Kent's basically a blank slate in these ones. And the reality they create, it just seems silly that no one recognises him. It also seems silly that with this, again, this realistic depiction of him, it also seems kind of silly that Clark Kent, with absolutely no experience, can walk into a job at a global newspaper. You know? Small things. Actually, one last small thing before we move on to Suicide Squad, right, is I thought the casting of Jeremy Irons in it was terrible. Jeremy Irons is a very good actor, but the age difference between him and Ben Affleck is not, like, it's like 19 years, right? So I don't buy that he could have been buttling for his father. The idea that, like, he watched Batman grow up. Like, how? So, yeah, that bothered me. I thought, good actor, too young for the role, or at least needed a bit more makeup. Folks, speaking of makeup, let's go on to Suicide Squad. What did people think of Suicide Squad? Ross, you first. Have you seen Suicide Squad?
I actually like it. Surprise. I actually really do like it. I think it's a good little, it's got massive plot flaws like all the other films, but there's a lot of good energy to this movie. Obviously, a certain character steals the entire show. I think we all know who we're talking about here.
Harley Quinn.
I mean, she's absolutely fantastic in the role, isn't she? And I mean, after the bitter aftertaste of Batman vs Superman, this is the kind of film that I needed in my life, especially in the DC universe, and it nailed everything for me. It's not perfect, as I said, but I can't. I'm looking forward to the next one.
Okay, yeah, we'll talk about at the end of this after we've gone through Justice League. I thought we'd finish up on a bit about the future of DC, if there is to be a future of DC. Good. What about yourself, Jim? Did you like this one?
I thought it was dire. I was really rooting for it. And the fact that you had little cameos from Batman and the really, really god-awful Jared Leto Joker, even that, I was still looking forward to it, but it just really missed the mark for me. It just wasn't a very good film. I've only watched it the once, which would have been probably when it first came out to rent. I actually paid money to watch it, which I really regret. And as you say, Harley Quinn's probably the best thing to come out of it. I didn't mind Deadshot, Will Smith's character, but I just thought it was more of a mess than Batman versus Superman, to be fair.
Personally, I really liked the presentation on it. I thought it still had a bit of darkness. It reminded you these people have obviously done bad things. So it didn't avoid that, but it was a much more kind of like a fun presentation style that they used in it. And I thought that worked for it. The thing that pissed me off, though, was like they seem to have this approach of, if we put popular songs on, then it'll be cool, because that's what we did in Guardians of the Galaxy. You're watching going, okay, so at one point you have Black Sabbath, then Paranoid is almost immediately followed up by, you've got the White Stripes at that point, Seven Nation Army, you've got Eminem, Guess Who's Back, that one, Without Me, and then you have Spirit in the Sky, right? And you're like, hold on, these are four songs that do not have the same vibe as each other at all. And the film's just resembling a series of music videos at this point. It's like, it's in a way quite cool to have them all together, but it just sort of made the film just feel like a collection of bits, which is a shame, because like there was some good bits. I saw the extended cuts. I don't know how much of it was added, but the scene when they're all hanging around in the bar, for me, was the best part of the film. Because it was a bit where you got to know the characters a wee bit more, rather than just sort of being like characters in music videos.
It's pretty much the only part I remember, to be fair, other than a few little snippets where you've got, he's Deadshot's reminiscing about being apprehended by Batman. But it's really unmemorable for me. Obviously, there was Cara Delevingne's villain that was just, I can't remember the name. It's that forgettable.
The Enchantress. And we didn't really get to know anything about her, because we never see her outside of the dramatic monologue scenes and stuff at the beginning. We didn't get any scenes where she wasn't like. Well, you got the one bit where she's being introduced by Viola Davis, But we didn't get to know her. She was just there to do her thing in the scene while Viola Davis gave exposition, and that bothered me because like it will come to the end of it where she's boring. Yeah, she's unremarkable.
Yeah, and I think for me one of what brought it down for me a little bit more was at this point you've got an established DC TV universe which are doing it 10 times better.
Yeah. They actually introduced the Suicide Squad in that, didn't they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the only other thing I've got of note here is for one of the themes is about them coming together as a team, right? But they didn't fight as a team very much. They mostly just sort of stood there and shot. Or like one of them would do something, the others just stand watching them, right? So it just, you didn't have like an Avengers or actually with at least the Snyder Justice League, which we'll come to in a wee bit, they fight as a team in that, which Suicide Squad just didn't. It didn't feel like they had that kind of synchronicity between the characters. And that I thought really let it down. The acting, I think, really elevated material. Viola Davis is great in it. Will Smith was really great in it. Margot Robbie was really great in it. Like, I wasn't huge in Jared Leto in it, but he was doing something different, I suppose.
Yeah, I admire they've tried to go a different route. I mean, how do you follow up Heath Ledger, to be fair? But, if there's going a different direction and there's going completely the opposite way, it just didn't work.
So am I right in thinking, like, I suppose the logic for a lot of this would have been Man of Steel bombed, and then Batman vs. Superman also bombed, and they presumably went, let's try and make a film that's a bit like what the other guys are doing.
Yeah.
And then that's all we got. So Ross, anything you want to say in the film's defence?
I don't think it's as bad as, Jim's making out, or it's deeply frustrating film. I'm not ashamed to say that I've been such a fan of The Dark Knight, the Batman vs Superman scarred me a little. Even rewatching the Steelbook edition, that was released, I found it even worse in the comfort of my own home. While Suicide Squad is not the redemption I was hoping for, it also weren't the final nail in the coffin that many were suggesting. It's a deeply flawed and at times a brainless superhero romp that will entertain just as much as make you angry. But, the younger generation will be more than transfixed by the arse of Robbie. Well, us older folk will probably vex a little and hope that Wonder Woman, which was coming next, would actually be the saviour of the DC universe. But there's room here. There's some really good set pieces. The ending was more like the Ghostbusters remake, CGI overload, which mostly grated me than anything else. But for me, Margot Robbie just steals the film, and that's worth the watch alone. Because Harley Quinn, which everyone's been looking forward to seeing as a live character, she's just perfect in the role. She really is.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think there's maybe a bit of a problem with the kind of anti-arc nature of it, because I think Warner's probably wanted to shy away from essentially depicting an abusive relationship with the hero. So they were like, okay, well, we're going to cut back some of the Joker stuff. The thing is, the movie ends, if people haven't gathered by now, we're doing full spoilers for all of these. The movie basically ends with the Joker coming in to rescue her, right? So it's like, well, what we supposed to have got is what she learned from the whole experience. She learns to do the right thing to an extent here. She's like, oh, I should probably look out for other people if they're worth saving and so on. It didn't gel with me. That someone who's so obviously as unambiguously bad as a Joker swoops in, and then she's like grinning away, and you're like, she's learned nothing from the experience.
So that's a flawed character more than anything on it. That's mostly to do with, how can I say what's the right word? How damaged of a character she is. No matter what she learns, as the Joker's the love of her life. If he turns up, she's going with him and she's going to follow him anywhere.
I guess I was just hoping she'd have had her, I believe he called her fantabulous emancipation during that film. At the time when I watched this, I thought, oh, that's a step up from either of the two Snyder ones. In hindsight, I probably like Batman v Superman better than it. However, the film seemed a lot worse after I saw the next one, which is Wonder Woman. I loved Wonder Woman. I thought this was a brilliant film. I thought the chemistry between Gal Gadot and Chris Pine was, there is a very charming love plot that it had. The world building, I think, was excellent. And, the attention to detail was very good. I liked the humour of it a lot. And I thought the action scenes were really well done, The use of bullet time there justified the kind of slow motion fetish. And finally, for me, it really earned its emotional stakes. There's a really good bit of character growth going on. When Pine's character died, I was gutted in it as well. I thought that was really, really well done. So yeah, for me, this is by some distance, before either Justice League, this is the best of the first four DC films.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think I agree with you there. It felt a bit like, I think I mentioned Superman Returns earlier. That this felt like the world of Richard Donner created. You had that alleyway scene, which was probably similar to Clark Kent and Lois Lane in 1978. I think it helps that it was directed by a female, Patty Jenkins, because she gave Wonder Woman, a different angle. What could I say? She's more of a leader, more of a presence. And yeah, I think you just summed that up perfectly. I think Wonder Woman is quite a strong film.
And looking forward to her. She's got Star Wars coming up. She's doing Rogue Squadron.
Yes, she is, yes.
How about yourself, Jim?
I think it's the only film I've been to see 4 times at the cinema, which should give you some indication how much I enjoyed it. Probably at the time it was my all-time favourite superhero movie. It's just so different to the other DC ones for a start, although I think most of that is down to feedback from the previous ones. Like the underlying message for this one really is, love is going to save us more than anything. But yeah, like everyone in it was so good. I don't think I've seen Chris Pine in anything better. His little speech towards the end as he's trying to explain just the nature of men to her, that really moved me. But yeah, the whole thing was just such a ride. As you say, it starts in Themyscira, getting to know her, getting to know how she's been brought up, and then the war is brought to them. And then you see them go from there to no man's land, getting caught up in it. It's just so good the way it all develops along. And, she gets to see what people are like for, firsthand. It's just a really, really brilliant film and such a departure from pretty much any of the other superhero films I'd seen at the time. Nowadays, though, having a daughter who has watched that film probably every day for many, many months at one point, you do get fed up of seeing it after a while. But yeah, it's still an absolute classic. Definitely, for me, I really love Man of Steel as well, but I would say that just pips it for being the best of the pre-Justice League DC films.
Hey, I think we're in a state of agreement here. I think the comedy in it was so well done as well. Like, there's a lot of good fish out of water stuff. I guess it's the way that you can make Wonder Woman go both a goddess, but you can also make her quite vulnerable as well. I think, as you're saying about her learning about what humans are like, I enjoyed when she's saying, okay, all of these people are possessed by Ares, we need to go off. As long as we can kill Ares. And I just thought that bit was so well done, when he's like, Luke, this isn't what it's about here. This isn't, your point of reference doesn't work to explain this world.
Yeah, I mean, just every time, as I say, I've seen it tons of times now, but every time, just that bit, I still always get the hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. It's just such a great moment. As I say, I can't think of another film I've seen Chris Pine in where he's seems that invested and that committed to that role. It's just incredible.
Was the soundtrack, was it Hans Zimmer again?
No, it was Rupert Gregson-Williams. Time.
It was fantastic.
For a lot of it, we just get teased with that theme until we finally get over the trenches at no man's land, and then it's like, fuck it, let's batter some Germans, and they're in that room, and she's basically taking them all on. They've all got their guns, but she's just kicking their asses, and then she punts that guy through the window. Brilliant stuff.
Absolutely brilliant. So this brings us towards the Justice League ones. Folks, we're basically wanting to cover the pre-Justice League ones, but just before we reach Justice League, with the... Everyone will be like, oh, just fucking start Justice League. But are the other ones, was it Aquaman, Harley Quinn, and Shazam, and Wonder Woman 1984? Are any of these ones particularly good for you guys? I've not seen any of them, so I can't comment.
Like, all of them are good in their own way. I mean, I would say Aquaman and Shazam are probably the weakest of those ones, personally. I mean, both start off brilliantly, but kind of lose the way as we go towards, typical big dust up at the end. Shazam probably is better than Aquaman for me because there's a lot of wish fulfillment in there. I mean, if I was watching that at 10 years old, that would probably have been the best film I'd ever seen. I mean, who doesn't dream of becoming, a big mighty superhero when they're, a young kid, and he can turn it off and on at will. And then at the end, he's got his brothers and sisters in on it as well. As a kid, that would have been so good for me. But it does kind of, it kind of lulls here and there. It's probably the lightest of the DC films as well, but I think it's because it's aimed at a younger audience as well. Aquaman has got massive sci-fi vibes about it, but I think it just suffers from being too long. It's got too much going on, and by the time you get to the big dust up at the end, I've kind of past caring. Although, there are people riding sharks, so you've got that going for it. The Birds of Prey movie, that is fantastic. That is probably, probably not quite as good as Wonder Woman 84 in my opinion, but it's a cracking film, and I can watch it every time it's on TV. I'll sit and watch it. I enjoy it. It's a great time. Ewan McGregor is a fantastic villain, absolutely camping it up and chewing the scenery on there. You can tell he's having a blast doing that. He plays an absolute arsehole, and he's rushing every second of it. And Wonder Woman 84, that was great. I enjoyed it. It kind of played out more of a mystery movie than a superhero one. We didn't really get as many big epic superhero fight moments as any of the previous films, but I enjoyed seeing the relationship between Diana and Steve again. And again, Chris Pine knocking it out the park again, if you ask me. And Pedro Pascal played I suppose he is the villain of the piece, but he's not a one-dimensional villain, so he has got a lot of sympathy from me anyway. And it was great seeing Kristen Wiig branch out into this sort of thing as well. I thought she made a good villain too. Again, not a one-dimensional baddie. Everyone had their own layers. It was great.
And how about yourself, Ross? Have you seen any of those ones?
It's amazing how me and Jim are so different tonight. I agree with Shazam. I think it's one of the best DC films of recent times. It's much like Jim said, if I watched that when I was 10 years old, it probably would be my favourite superhero film. It's such a joy. You should watch it, David. Honestly, it's really, really good. Aquaman, I think it's up there with Wonder Woman. It's a brilliant starting point for that character. And I went in, didn't quite fancy it, and I came out blown away by it. But as for Wonder Woman 1984, oh my God, it's the worst film I've seen this year. I'm sorry, Jim, but how can they get it so wrong? I mean, you have Steve coming back, which is probably a severe case of deja vu. I mean, I got so bored towards the end because it was only leading one way. The problem with Wonder Woman 84 is that it overstays its welcome. It becomes bogged down with overplaying its many subplots. It's basically a typical sequel in which it tried to go bigger and better, but failing to remind itself of what we liked about it in the first place. Diehard fans will no doubt lavish the praise, mostly because of Wonder Woman herself, who deserves all the acclaim. But for many, they will be so bitterly disappointed with it. I went away so frustrated, and it hasn't been well received with the fans. So I think that sums it up, really.
Did you see Birds of Prey?
Yes, I've seen Birds of Prey. Yeah, it's quite good in it. As you quite rightly said, Ewan McGregor's fantastic in it. But yeah, that's pretty good as well. That's a pretty good addition as well.
And now, folks, for our feature presentation.
What are your superpowers again?
I'm rich.
One thing I can tell you is you got to be free.
My turn.
Come together. Right now. Come together. Right now.
Shall we?
Okay, folks, so we are going to be talking all things Justice League.
Yay!
It's a story of two very different directors with very different takes on the same material. Now, with Joss Whedon, I'm going to try and be charitable here, which goes against my nature a little bit. I'm sure we've all heard the alleged stories about Joss Whedon's behaviour on different movie sets for a period of decades. So, he's not a guy I particularly like the idea of extending charity to here. He had an almost impossible task, which is, we want you to make a different film out of this footage and to reshoot some sequences that you can add to the footage that you have, but make the film like the film that you previously made yourself. And that's an uphill battle and a half. So I believe the story was that the studio wanted to cut off about 90 minutes of content from Zack Snyder's one. Can you make this less than 2 hours? And Snyder, obviously, is something, he had a huge personal loss, like absolutely unimaginable loss. By the sounds of it, immersed himself in his work for a period of a couple of months, trying to avoid thinking about what happened with his daughter, and then realised he couldn't, and quit and abandoned the project along with his wife, who's a producer. And I think coming into that project, knowing that you had 7 months to get this ready for a cinema release, and it basically needed large reshoots. Whedon's record of superhero films, I think, is at best mixed, but at the same time, I reckon if he'd had full creative control over this, I think we would have had something that's stronger than what we saw. That being said, there is a lot of stuff that's clearly his content in this that doesn't hugely work. I mean, firstly, actually, what do you guys think of Joss Whedon as a creative?
Personally, I haven't seen, well, not consciously seen a lot of his stuff. Obviously, there's the Avengers films. Avengers Assemble at the time was incredible. I really enjoyed it. But I feel that has got a bit weaker over the years, as has been bigger and better since. Age of Ultron is probably my favourite superhero film of that era. I enjoy that much more than Avengers Assemble. And I think his only other feature film I've seen is Serenity, which again is a decent sci-fi flick. And I've seen a few episodes of the TV show Firefly it's based on. And again, that's pretty good. But overall, not my cup of tea. I know he's been involved with a lot of other films, be it, producer or writer. It was Cabin in the Woods one he was involved with.
Yeah, he was writer on Cabin in the Woods, I believe.
Yeah, that was quite fun. Although the only bit I remember about it is the merman.
I mean, Buffy the Vampire Slayer's a fantastic show. It was so popular for a damn good reason, I think I agree with you with the Avengers. I wasn't huge in Avengers Assemble. I think Age of Ultron is, in hindsight, a significantly stronger film than it. But I think, like, what he has is a very different approach from Snyder. I think with Zack Snyder, this is a guy who wants his heroes to be gods. And Joss Whedon doesn't. Joss Whedon wants his heroes to be just like you or I, but they happen to have, like, a special suit or something. I think one thing I will credit Joss Whedon's version of Justice League on, he makes the characters more vulnerable. Whereas I think with Snyder is... people used to laugh when you've got the trailer for Watchmen. It comes up saying from visionary director Zack Snyder. I remember people used to make jokes about it, right? But the thing is, Zack Snyder is a fantastic visualist. I think he's got a really good sense of framing. He can make shots that look incredible. I just don't think he's got very much depth to what he does. Like, if you listen to the commentary on the Watchmen Blu-ray, you've got these incredible shots, and it's just Zack Snyder going, "Yeah, we did it that way because it looked cool," and fair enough, it does look really cool, but I don't think he makes relatable characters. I don't think he makes relatable films. That's not necessarily a bad thing. Nor does Stanley Kubrick, right? But at the same time, I think, like, it's a really strange pairing.
Going back to Joss, I hate when someone asks me, what is my favourite film, because it's an impossible, to answer. For my undying love of Halloween, I absolutely adore Die Hard with the same affection. But if someone asked me what are my top 10 TV programmes of all time, then it would include Buffy. Because Joss, for me, delivered such a perfect TV show. It was written beautifully with a genuine heartbeat. The characters are fantastic. And to be fair, most people believe it's Whedon's best work. But then you've got Angel, the spin-off, which is equally, or some would say better, than Buffy. Then, of course, he moved on to Firefly, which, sorry, Jim, is arguably a masterpiece. Cut off way before its prime. I still hurt thinking about that. But he did direct Serenity, the film version, which is probably better than any of the recent Star Wars films. So when he's on form, I think Whedon is one of the best around. And I think it's got to be his own material as well. And he's a bit like, I would say he's a bit like JJ. They both shared the same career paths. JJ went from Lost to Alias to Fringe and then to Mission Impossible and Star Wars. But I think with Joss, he doesn't get that consistency. He hasn't that big film. But when he's on form, when he's on consistent, he's really, really good. But then, of course, he did write Alien Resurrection, which killed the Ripley franchise.
Oh, God, yeah. And I remember seeing give such a shit reflection on that later, where he's going, "Oh, the problem was all about the casting, because the film would have been a masterpiece if Brad Dourif wasn't in it, apparently." Yeah. you're like, mate, if Ripley fucks an alien at one point, right? this is the thing that people don't like about it,
I think Joss works better when he's doing his own material. And I think bringing him in to do Justice League, I can see why they done it, because like you said, because of the Avengers background, but it didn't work. And oh my God, I hate this movie, but carry on.
Yeah, because I think that's maybe part of it, that they thought, well, he's a logical choice because, he's not like the sort of brooding Christopher Nolan stuff. He's not like the earlier Zack Snyder ones here. We need a bit of light in the darkness. I just think the thing is, it felt like a film that was made by committee. In fact, let's go to the jugular of this. What were your guys' overall impressions of the cinematic version of Justice League? Ross, you really don't like this one, do you?
I hate this movie. I think it's quite possibly one of the worst superhero films of all time. And I'm sorry to say that. There's been many bad superhero films, but this tops the lot. It makes the infamous, never released, but everyone has seen it, Roger Corman's The Fantastic Four, seem like a masterpiece. If Canon Films were still around, they would have been laughing out loud in 2017 and screaming, "And you thought that Superman 4 was a bad film?" Yes, The Man of Steel's Quest of Peace is an awful film, but there's such a delightful charm to it all. You just can't take your eyes off it. But which Justice League 2017 just hasn't got. It's an absolute dire film. From the very first scene where we saw Henry's Superman reshot scene, Now, I'm not even going to include the infamous CJ no mustache look. But for me, it's the Joey Tribbiani moment. I am talking about Friends for a second. That scene where Joey talks about how to smell a fart, an acting trick in which, if you forget your line, you put your head up high and breathe in. When the kid asks Superman, "What is the best thing on planet Earth?" Honestly, Cavell mimics that Joey move.
Fuck me off that we didn't see that question get answered. I thought like we'd have like the last shot of the film would be the end of a video or something.
Oh, I mean, is it a bird? Is it plane? No, it's Joey Tribbiani. It's oh my God! Honestly, where do I start with this?
We'll dissect this in a few different sections in a moment, just to get a broad feeling on this. What about yourself, Jim? What was your broad view on this one?
Initially, when I first saw it, I actually quite enjoyed it. I knew we weren't getting the full meal, so to speak. This was more the fast food version of Justice League. And, I was fine with that. You could see the seams, couldn't you? You knew what Joss Whedon, well, for the most part, you knew what he'd added to it compared to what was already there. But again, I let it pass because it worked for me personally. I enjoyed it. I liked what I saw. I didn't like that they'd got Danny Elfman in to do the music, however. I thought he pretty much half-assed that, really. There's no two ways about it. So that put a bit of a dampener on it for me. But overall, at this point, you're accepting that these films are going to have shitty CGI baddies. Half of it's going to be animated. And, I made my peace with that long before I'd even seen this. So those things weren't a detraction for me. And despite its obvious reshoots and Cable's top lip, I still had a good time. And I thought it was good. Looking at it since seeing the Snyder Cut, yeah, like every note I have written down about watching it is a negative.
I thought the film was okay when I first saw it. Which, like, when I say I first saw it, I mean this is like last week, right? I thought it was all right. But the thing was, thinking about it later, like, there's so much wrong with it in terms of like the way that they're introducing 3 new characters, for example, but you don't really get much context for any of them. Because this is the first time any of us have seen Flash. It's the first time any of us have seen Cyborg. It's the first time any of us have seen Aquaman, outside of our little cameos in Batman v Superman. I thought they were all kind of done a disservice by the narrative. Like, there was too much material to force this into a 2-hour movie, and it felt like the Justice League basically got sidelined in their own film, And I thought that aspect of it sucked. I thought the last act of it was really weak. Snyder Cut, whilst imperfect, it's such a different piece, and it's such a stronger version of the same material.
Absolutely. And I don't know if I'm getting ahead of myself here, but it's glaringly obvious where those reshoots were, especially in the last big fight, I suppose. Putting them side by side, it makes you wonder why they even did. Leaving in what eventually was in the Snyder Cut wouldn't have made much of a difference at all to what was going on. I mean, I don't understand why a good deal of that was changed, especially all the CGI top lip stuff. I mean, a lot of it was unnecessary. It just absolutely baffled me as to why it was done.
Oh yeah, and I mean, the thing is, they basically spent another movie's budget on reshoots for this movie, I thought what we do is we go through it in terms of there's 4 different sections: presentation, plot, characters, and action. I mean, we'll be a bit of crossover here, but in terms of presentation, she mentioned the Danny Elfman score, which I also wasn't a huge on. I thought, like, it was nice that it was so nostalgic, playing a lot of the old character themes, and it was cheerier. And also the orchestra version of the Wonder Woman theme was really cool, but at the same time, the Junkie XL one was just so much more grungy, much more angry, and I think it was a lot more consistent with this sort of end of the world vision that I think Snyder was going for with it.
Absolutely. I mean, as I've said about Man of Steel, it was if the music was an additional character in the film, which Danny Elfman just did not bring in that version. So it was such a relief for me personally when I saw that JXL was going to be back on scoring duties. And I've got to be honest, it was probably a little more orchestral than I was expecting it to be, because there was a lot of electronic synth stuff with the previous 2 films with Batman and Superman. But still, it didn't disappoint. It definitely felt like it had that extra layer of character that was missing.
What do you think, Ross, about the presentation of both versions?
Well, the Zack Snyder edition is leaps and bounds above it, you know. I just want to banish this 2017 version from my mind, my memory. I gotta be honest with you, because I think you and I spoke in the week, David. You know, you need to watch this again, and I messaged you saying, "Yes, I'm going to watch it. I put it on now," and it lasted 40 minutes, and it's not like I can't. Honestly, I hated it to begin with, and I tried it the second time, couldn't watch it, and I just tried it the third time, and I'm so glad that Zack Snyder's version now exists, because I can now throw this away. I've actually got a DVD copy of the Justice League. Don't know why I bought it, but that went in the bin last week, let me tell you.
Yeah, I'm kind of weird on that one. I don't think I'll ever watch the 2017 version again. I just don't see it as necessary now we've got this other one.
The one thing I say about the presentation, or if you mean by the filming as well, I should have mentioned this earlier. The one thing that I don't agree, the one thing that doesn't work for me in these films is Batman in the daylight. I think he loses a lot of his aura. You know, there's a few scenes in the daylight. It's a bit like, and it's not just these. I mean, Christopher Nolan done it with Bane in the fight scene in The Dark Knight Rises. You know, Batman in the daylight just doesn't work for me. He looks like an imposter running around, you know, trying to be Batman. But that's just my personal view.
Yeah, there were a few moments like when they all take Superman's casket to Star Labs, and they're all stood there in front of Cyborg's dad, and it just looks like they're going to fucking Comic-Con or something, doesn't it? It just looks so daft and out of place.
It's just as daft as Clark Kent as Bruce Wayne going to Clark Kent's funeral at the end of Batman vs Superman.
Yeah.
You know, why would if anyone watching are thinking, why is Bruce Wayne there? Oh, you must be Superman.
Bruce Wayne throughout the course of the movie was not subtle about his identity. In the Justice League, as we're going to refer to it here, where he takes a phone call in front of the villain and says Alfred's name over it. I was like, what? And then he goes to recruit Aquaman, openly referring to himself as part of the Justice League, you know? I didn't like that.
It wasn't just that moment, is when Lois Lane and Clark's mother it's different in the Snyder version, but in the 2017 one, they actually having a massive conversation in the middle of the press office, you know, about their son and how he was Superman and everything. I mean, if anyone was listening to that, they're in the middle of a newsroom full of reporters. I mean, the biggest headline the next day was, we know who Superman was, which they should really know, because he died in Batman vs Superman the same day Clark Kent did. And now they got to explain how they both back alive. Anyway.
In terms of other parts of the presentation, I was unfamiliar with the character of Steppenwolf until I saw that, right? And he looked so much better in the Snyder cut. Like his face looked a lot less like he just looked a bit dopey in the cinematic version. He looked a lot more horrific in the Snyder version. He looked a lot cooler, basically, and a lot more intimidating.
Absolutely. I completely agree with that. It was a lot scrawnier and much more ambivalent in the Justice League. So that's not going to catch on, is it?
For the rest of the podcast.
But yeah, they definitely beefed him up and they fleshed him out from all sides. In 2017 version, he was one-sided. All he was there to do was get these boxes and destroy the Earth. No explanation. He's just needed to do that. But there's so much more backstory for him there with this newer version. The
one thing I will say about the presentation, the biggest compliment I can give the Snyder version is right from the changed beginning, you know, when the credits going up, it felt epic. It actually felt like this was going to be an event movie. And I was actually shocked, because I actually went into this with low expectations. You know, I was one of the many people who thought, do we really need this version out there? But even the changed beginning, you know, showing the recap of Batman vs Superman, I was blown away thinking, oh, this feels oomph. You know, I had a bit of buzz, I had a bit of energy. I don't know if it's because there's been lack of films out of material, and this is something, you know, which is a welcome addition in our lives. But yeah, this felt special.
I completely agree with you on that. I thought the beginning bit was fantastic. That was a real sort of all your hairs standing up sort of moment as we see the physical consequences of the death of Superman. From the get-go, it was epic. This was something huge, and I agree, it very much felt like an event movie. Potentially, because as you say, we're of us have been to cinema for a long time. I absolutely welcomed that. The 4:3 ratio didn't really do much for me, but
I didn't mind. I mean, I've seen plenty of films shot that way, which, it never bothers me. My only gripe with it really is we are still in the middle of lockdowns, quarantines, that sort of thing. I know it's presented this way for the eventuality it may end up on IMAX, but who the fuck's going to the pictures at the minute?
yeah. Like I just sort of thought, like, I pity the people watching this who don't have a quality TV or are watching it on a laptop or something like that, because they're getting even less of the image than they usually would.
At least if it was on Amazon Prime and you're watching it on your iPad, it'd fill the screen. They do that with 4:3 films on there, so there's that. And I found the colorization to be very different between the two as well. It's definitely more of a color-washed tone with the Snyder Cut than Joss Whedon, which I think he's turned the contrast up on his version. The greens are the greenest green you'll ever see, and it's definitely artificially colorized on both, really. I mean, neither seem natural in any way.
When you compare both of them's final battle in terms of their presentation, the difference is literally night and day.
Yes.
That's the best joke I've got, folks. I feel so pleased I prepared that a couple of days ago. Literally, that baffled me. Why they went, all right, we're going to give everything this big red hue over it, for your final fight with the Justice League.
One thing I did forget rewatching that version was the weird, tentacle roots and the alien flowers that seemed to sprout everywhere. Again, that just seemed wholly unnecessary. You're meant to be trimming the film down, not adding pointless crap to it, surely.
One thing I'm going to flaw Snyder on, so his love of slow-mo, obviously people take a piss out of that all the time, and it's apparently 10% of the film is in slow motion. I thought the character Flash was a great match for him for that exact reason. But something about Snyder is the thing, he's not a subtle filmmaker. And where you had your Nick Cave songs coming in, good choice of music, very on-the-nose lyrics. You've got Aquaman going down to Atlantis, says, "There is a kingdom," plays in the background. You're like, oh, for fuck's sake, did he just do that? I think with Zack Snyder, he's not a filmmaker who gets bogged down in duality of meaning or ambiguity or anything like that, but at the same time, it'll look quite cool.
Was it Garth Marenghi who said subtext is for cowards?
Absolutely. With the reshoots, something I noticed was that Ben Affleck's weight fluctuates between scenes, and so does his hairline.
I didn't notice, I got to be honest with you. I was too busy engrossing the film.
It's a whole new reason to rewatch. See if you can spot the bits.
I can't do another 4 hours. Oh god.
I'm talking about Whedon's one. It's a bit where Batman goes between rooms and he gains weight. I was like, okay, so that's obviously the reshoot here.
Right, I'll make a note of that.
In fairness to Zack Snyder, with the exception of the scene at the end, I believe all of it was stuff that he'd shot before 2017.
Well, fair play. You could tell he had a plan there, can't you? I mean, that's one thing I give him total and utter credit for. All the little plot lines that was built in Batman versus Superman, and even Man of Steel paid off in this film. And I'm just happy that, it's actually out there now for people to see.
Well, this brings us to the plot section. Something I was pleased with here was in the Snyder Cut, the boxes becoming active after Superman's death actually made sense. Whereas there's no clear explanation for it in the Whedon Cut.
Well, the whole plot of the mother boxes is really shit, let's be honest. I mean, it's better explained in the Snyder version, but, there are people protecting these powerful boxes for 1,000 years, and when the shit at the fans, they don't really have a plan, do they? Wonder Woman's island, they point the arrows, hoping that will stop it, and then they put it on a horse and run away with it. It's a bit of that is on both films is a bit of a naff storyline.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think whichever side of the fence you're on, it's a bit lame.
Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, I think at least it was tied to the event of Superman's death, so there was something variable to do with that. I mean, I think boxes were also, as you said, they are an awkward plot device, but they are at least better explained.
So I was going to say, you do get that snippet of Lex Luthor at the beginning while he's still in the Krypton ship. It's Steppenwolf with the 3 boxes there, which then leads on to his little monologue at the end of Batman v Superman about, the god is dead, so it's free reign from everyone else.
One of my favourite bits of the film, just as a kind of what the fuck moment, is when you see, all right, we're going to be keeping these boxes secure. You've got it being hidden in an ancient temple by the Amazons. You have it kept below the water in the kingdom of Atlantis by the Atlanteans. Then you have the humans dig a hole beside the river and chuck it in. It was like 3 feet deep. Like a dog could have find that,
Metal detector.
I was like, what the fuck is that?
When it showed you them doing it first, it kind of zoomed in on their faces, didn't it? So I kind of got the impression that this isn't the last they're going to see of it, but it just didn't go anywhere. So I can only assume that after a few hundred years, it may have been erosion that reveals the box.
I mean, that was just so unintentionally funny. A bit at the beginning where we see, so Whedon's cut brings in, here's the world falling to shit without Superman. There was a bit of it was also unintentionally funny there. We've got the... this bit isn't going to sound funny, it's an explanation after it's unintentionally funny, right? So you've got the racist attack happening at the shop. The thing that I thought to myself is, I don't buy the racists don't do racist attacks because they're worried about Superman seeing them.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
I just sort of thought, I don't think Superman's... I doubt he's really intervenes in these sorts of things very often. I mean, I'd like it if he did, if he just had... once Superman's got back, right, then the end credits, he could have shown the same 2 characters, breaking bread together, literally breaking bread together or something, and Superman's going good stuff, the old Captain Planets, where Captain Planet at one point brings peace to Israel and Palestine, and at one point brings you manages to unite Ireland, and So I would like to see that happen with the end credit. The pacing, I thought, was actually, despite that one of these films was 4 hours long, I thought the pacing was much better in the Snyder one, because he was using the time to build up the characters. Introducing 3 new people in an ensemble piece is an absolute mission here. And credit to him, while the first act at points did feel like it was dragging, you got a lot more depth for Atlantis, right? You got a lot more of the sort of politics of Atlantis. I'm laughing at my own joke. You got a lot more of the sort of politics of Atlantis there. You got a lot more context for Cyborg, especially, who was completely done a disservice by the Whedon cut, where they removed the entire NFL part from it.
Cyborg is a much more fleshed out character in the Snyder cut. He comes across as an arsey bastard, you're going to feel a bit pissed off that you're now a robot because you were about to die. But he does have just the attitude of an entitled little prick in the Whedon version, and it doesn't really get any better. He doesn't really have any redemption or anything like that. At least we get time for him well, from the off in Zack Snyder's version, he's just comes across as a better person. Yeah, he's still tackling his new life, but he's, not so much rebelling against it as he is in the Whedon version, and he's just less of a dick on the whole.
I think every character is fleshed out much better in the new version. Even the side characters like Lois Lane, he gave Amy Adams more purpose in the Snyder version than he did, in Whedon's version. She had a better storyline. She was actually in mourning. I like the fact that she was visiting his Superman's memorial virtually every day, instead of going back to working on daily plan like he was forgotten in the 2017 version. Yeah, but what I loved about this film, I know it's 4 hours long, so they had the chance to, but it let you breathe in it. It actually built up to something. Explain the concept a lot more.
I liked the end part where they're bringing in maybe the Lois is the key to everything was something darker. Because it just seemed to mean nothing in the Whedon one. I guess we go, okay, well, maybe Lois needs to be there to bring back Superman, which is something that we brought up as a possibility and then proceeded to dismiss in the Snyder one, which I thought was good.
But the reason why when she turned up towards the end, and Superman saw her, the reason why he stopped because he sensed that she was pregnant with his child. So that's the reason why his humanity come back. He thought the love of his life was pregnant with his child, and yes, she was actually the key, which actually makes sense to what the Flash said in Batman vs Superman.
I think there was a few little bits where they seemed to be sorting out some things that were plot holes in the original one. Like, for instance, when Cyborg appears to malfunction for absolutely no reason, it makes more sense in the Snyder one because, he's had these sort of images of what will happen. And we imagine that's that side of him fighting against himself. Or at least that's the only way to really make much sense of it.
Yeah, I think they have the same explanation. We just don't get that depth of Cyborg understanding what they might be unleashing. Again, looking at them side by side, it's trimmed to within an inch of its life in the Whedon cut. We basically get concise notes compared to what we see in the longer version, which is obvious. But the same could be said as most of the scenes. It seems to be that they've been just trimmed down so much. We're only getting some of it as opposed to everything we see. Even if it's just a few seconds, just those few seconds could just give you that extra little bit of understanding, and it just didn't make sense why they got rid of certain little bits.
Oh, the nice bit where Alfred and Wonder Woman are making tea together, for instance. Just a small little sequence that just kind of enriched the world there.
Which then
also Alfred meets Superman was cool.
Yeah, and again, that wouldn't have stretched the film out any longer than it already was. And plus that bit where Wonder Woman sat at the computer with Alfred, they actually make that bit longer in the Joss Whedon cut than they do the Zack Snyder one. It was completely unnecessary. And again, just makes Cyborg come across as a bit more of an asshole than he should be.
One other thing that I got for the plot part here is I like that, towards the end where you're seeing this noise that's heard all over the world, to build up the final fight. And I thought that was really cool. As with the beginning, he's got this great ability to kind of build something up, And I reckon he delivered here. This, for me, was a far stronger effort than either of Zack Snyder's previous ones with DC. I think it's just way stronger than Man of Steel. I think it was also more substantial than Batman v Superman.
While watching the Snyder Cut, I felt as if I had somehow gained the powers that Patricia Arquette and Tuesday Night's character had in the Nightmare on Elm Street Parts 3 and 4. And that I had gone to bed, fallen into a deep sleep, and somehow become the Dream Master and entered into one of Zack Snyder's ultimate wet fantasy dreams. Because it's basically Snyder having the biggest orgasm on screen. It's the Lover's Guide edition for fans of DC. I honestly don't know how anyone can hate this film. It's preposterous. It's beyond ridiculous at times. I mean, come on, we have a scene where the Flash saves a hot dog in slow motion. How can anyone hate this movie? It's everything Snyder fans wanted and needed. And the one thing I did like about this version as well, which we haven't mentioned, that in the 2017 one, they had this odd Wonder Woman and Batman flirting with each other.
Oh, fuck, yeah.
I was really uncomfortable watching that first time. I know they got a bit of backstory in the comics, but I'm so glad in this version, the new version, it was more professional and they got rid of it.
What I noticed about the Joss Whedon version, and it seems a bit obvious in light of recent revelations, is that he's actually toned down the women being able to help themselves. For example, the part where Steppenwolf is fighting with Mira underwater, the bit in the Snyder Cut is fantastic. She takes the water away from them so they can't float. And then she starts to pull all the water out of his body. And then you see all the blood and that coming along.
Oh, that was cool as fuck.
Yeah. In the Whedon cut, it's Steppenwolf grabbing her by the throat, pushing her against the wall and throwing her on the floor. Like, they completely miss out the bit where she's fighting back for herself.
I think part of the problem with it, though, is that with the way that he wanted to do it, Superman is essentially a one-man team here. He's bringing in, these... Not only is the world fucked in the absence of Superman, the Justice League are pretty much useless without Superman. They're against this force far greater than them. And I think that was something that Snyder handled way better. Snyder showed them function as a team.
Yeah. I mean, there's a couple of other instances I picked up on as well. There's the big fight scene in, was it the cooling tower on the island?
Yes.
Steppenwolf says, "She's mine." And in the Snyder Cut, Wonder Woman responds with, "I belong to no one." Whereas that's a completely different line of dialogue in Joss Whedon's version. And then you've got that awful bit where it's just after the little slow-mo bit of the Flash, he knocks Wonder Woman's sword to her, but then he trips over. And then they fall down. In the Snyder Cut, they both land on their feet. They're superheroes. What are you going to do? But in Joss Whedon's version, you've got, she just about saves herself after killing one of those parademons. But then you get all that debris falling from above. So the Flash has to save her because, it's Wonder Woman. It's not like she can't look after herself. And then they end up on the floor with his face in her boobs.
Which was previously done in Ultron. So, I think for Whedon, this is just one of his... but years later, where we're looking at the auteur of it, as Whedon will go, "Oh yeah, he's very fond of the comical face and breasts motif." It's like his version of the Tarantino body in the trunk thing.
I'll stick up for Whedon Bureau. Do you think it's the studio telling him he's got to add jokes and make it lighter? And maybe that stupid scene of that news report of a woman claiming an alien stole her husband, with a disbelieving news reporter who clearly hasn't looked out the window and seen Superman flying around.
You're right. I think the studio said, "All right, we wanted to add humour, right? That's where you bring him in." But you're like, but the guy falling on a woman's chest joke, you're like, last time you did this, people criticised you for it. And he's like, nah, that's coming back. We're going to do this to Wonder Woman as well, It just felt lazy.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And everyone is 20 times more sarcastic as well. You get that with a couple of the characters from your Marvel films. Like Tony Stark, he's a sarky bastard. It's pretty much his defining trait. But here, pretty much, every bit of rewritten dialogue is just them, sarkily having to snap at each other. Even Batman has stupid one-liners, which, in all the other films he might have done. But it's more in keeping with the tone of those films, whereas here it's just
Flash should be the comical character, and there's a bit of humor where Cyborg in the Snyder Cut, the bit where he's going, "Do you think Wonder Woman's into younger guys?" And he's like, "She's 5,000 years old." All guys are younger guys, right? Which works, but it's not a gag as such. I mean, it's something that you could believe the character would just say quite gravely, you know?
Yeah. But that's another bit that got me. Why did they need to reshoot that bit as well?
Yeah, absolutely.
That was perfectly fine as it was. And in fact, the reshot bit was worse.
Something that I think does work, one extra bit of characterization that Whedon adds that Snyder didn't have, is I liked when Batman's kind of got this existential angst about, like, I have absolutely no life. And I quite liked that little bit of it. I sort of wish he'd done more with it.
Yeah, he does seem willing to sacrifice himself if it means that Superman's basically back on the scene. He would be willing to take that for the team if it means they've got this god that can save the Earth again.
Once Superman was in there fighting, and they're basically there as his backing band or his fluffers, I suppose. It just kind of seemed to, like, the others could have just left. For Superman, battering Steppenwolf, right? There's almost a bit. It's not a bit where he's like, "Oh, is he still alive?" and then goes to carry on battering him, right? Like, it's just he's a minor inconvenience, And that was like you got to feel there's a bit of danger here,
What was quite disappointing in terms of Superman coming back as well, like, he finally joins them at the end during this fight. Things are just turning in their direction. And, civilians. So he fucks off and leaves them to it again. So why did that need to happen? They added this pointless family to...
Oh, God, the Russian family subplot.
Yeah, just to put a couple more things at stake in there. But it just was completely unnecessary. If that whole thing was not in there, no one would have cared any less. And it just felt like it was there to let the Flash and Superman have a little, couple of bits, stupid little off-the-cuff comments and, the one-upmanship, that sort of thing. That, again, was completely unnecessary.
One thing I would quickly like to add about those two characters is I enjoyed the post-credit sequence where the two of them are about to race.
Well, the Rocky 3 montage.
Yeah, to answer that age-old question about Superman could outrun the Flash, that amused me.
With Batman knowing this, and it's nothing to do with Snyder or Whedon's version, for me personally, how out of place he is in this big, plot of aliens fighting in space. I mean, he looks so out of place. I mean, next to all the superheroes, this is a man who's virtually a rich guy who lives in a Batcave, and his bad guys, his nemesis, a Joker, and the Riddler, and here he is fighting people like Steppenwolf and Darkseid. I think it's the one film where I preferred seeing Bruce Wayne than I did Batman, and I think, for the majority of him, to be fair on Ben Affleck, and it's going to be a shame we're never going to see him in a solo film. I think he carries the film. Especially the Snyder's version.
I'm kind of weird on that. I mean, I think Batman being in the Justice League as a whole is a bit daft when you've got a Wonder Woman and Superman for a start. But there's one aspect that I did like, and I quite liked the beginning bit where he is using that criminal as bait to lure out one of the parademons. I mean, it is a bit goofy and stupid, but I also enjoyed it because it was a Batman bit in Gotham, and I quite liked that little image of the city in that little section at the beginning. I quite enjoyed how they stylized it compared to how it was in Batman vs Superman.
Jim, as a fan of the comics, Steppenwolf, does he get much coverage in them?
None of the ones I've read,
okay.
To be fair. This was my first experience of the character as well. I mean, I've read a fair few of the comics, but not really many of the Justice League ones, to be fair. So I don't know whether he's a character exclusive to those arcs or what, but in the comics I've read, I've never seen him.
Because something I really enjoyed about him is with the Snyder one, I liked that, he's like... He's not even the big villain in the piece. He's actually quite pathetic here. He's just doing this to try and impress his boss, basically. And Darkseid's the one that's really getting built up here. You're like, all right, Steppenwolf here. This guy, he's evidently quite hard. He's a vicious bastard in the Snyder when he's chucking horses around and stuff like this and breaking old temples. But it's a way that he's basically just doing this to curry favour with his boss, you know?
Yeah.
His boss jumps in as if, like, you know, he's contacting him on Slack or something like this to be like, you know, what are you up to? And, you know, he's like, this is my one chance to get back and so on. Like, he was such a more interesting character. Like, you know, he's both very fierce, but it reminds you that he's also nothing compared to Darkseid, you know, and I assume Darkseid would have been in the sequel.
Yeah, you've got that moment where Darkseid appears on that weird monolithic space phone or whatever it is he's got. And, you know, as soon as he sees him, like, he is literally, his guard is down. He just becomes this pathetic little mess, you know, at his presence. And it was great to see that there was more than just that one side to him of, I'm here to destroy the planet.
I think the Whedon cut, like, his motivation isn't very clear. You know, when he comes in to the temple and then he goes, "Mother, you call me home to a box." I was like,
yeah.
His mum's a box? Like, he just didn't really explain this at all, you know?
Yeah, it goes on about the unity and the mother boxes. Although he does mention Darkseid in one little moment. So, again, it confuses his motivation there. And you've got all that flashback to when he tried to take over the Earth in the Age of Heroes and basically gets his ass kicked. That's completely retold in the Snyder Cut because it's Darkseid, not Steppenwolf that's doing it.
What do you think of Steppenwolf for us?
Well, I think he's the worst villain ever in the original Justice League film. He makes the Rock CGI a terrible effect in the Scorpion King look like the work of art. And
the worst villain ever was also in a DC film, which was Sharon Stone's character in Catwoman.
No.
She was invincible because she wore so much face cream, right? That was literally the plot.
In Justice League, in Joss's version, he disappears for the majority of the film. He finds 2 boxes on his own with hardly no bother. And then when it comes to the last box, he sends those stupid little moths because I think he can't be bothered anymore. And then he turns up right at the end and gives this little speech, which he only says on purpose for Superman to come in with a grand line, "Hey, I'm back." It's pathetic, honestly. It really is. But at least in the Snyder version, he has a better story arc. You know, and I believed him. He looked great as well. You know, I know the CGI was a bit iffy, which I will think, but you can see why he had motive, and you can actually see he just wanted to impress Darkseid, who was quite a formidable foe, even though, even in the new version, we didn't get enough of him.
That and when he finally does get the third box, he finds it just lying there in a car park.
Other small notes I've got on the characterization. Flash is the most enjoyable character in both. Yeah, he's done a disservice in the Whedon one because we didn't get much of the context of his of what happened with his mom. We didn't get the relationship with his dad very much, you know, and we just didn't really get a sense of who he was, which we got a lot more of that in the in the Snyder one. I think he benefited from it. Cyborg, he's trying to look conspicuous, so he's trying to look inconspicuous. So he wears a hoodie. It's like, okay, an eye patch would be far more useful here, or a jacket that at least closes. And my last little character is Aquaman. He did almost nothing in the Whedon version. Like, he was just basically there. Like, I liked when he sits in the lasso of truth. That was quite funny, and that was a good addition. But other than that, he didn't have that many cool moments. Like, yeah, he surfs the baddie, well, that's something that's from Snyder Cut anyway. But he doesn't really contribute much to the plot. And, it's not really very clear why Batman was so desperate to employ him in it. Like, for a lot of the film, he just felt a bit like a spare cock at an orgy. Like he wasn't really doing anything that impacted upon the wider story.
It's clear in a few points leading up to the main battle at the end that he is very strong. I mean, he does take on Steppenwolf at one point when he's stealing the mother box, and then there's a bit where he intervenes when that tunnel's flooding. And, he's got his uses there. But yeah, for the rest of the Joss Whedon film, he's just there.
Like, it was bizarre if they cut out the scenes with William Dafoe, for instance. That this stuff is integral to his character, who he is. And we lose his best moment where, he's got his great big trident that he's ramming through Steppenwolf, right? Bits where he was really cool. And we just kind of lose this where he becomes a kind of nondescript kind of character, didn't have the best lines in it, was obviously in a supporting role, and the audience wouldn't have known who he was. And for some reason, he's got this picture of himself on the wall as this sea person, whilst he's sitting there going, "There's no sea person." That's at least shave your beard if you're going to have the illustration. But yeah, I think Snyder basically had a vision for the character, and I think he delivered it as well.
Yeah, going back to that picture, one of the things that grated about the Whedon cut as well was all the imagery for the boxes. We get that these are a integral, MacGuffin. It's what's driving Steppenwolf, but it just felt really heavy-handed and forced. When the parademon explodes, there's 3 boxes behind and it's entrails, and then they're on this wall and it's in Lex Luthor's notes. It seemed a pointless focus on a fair bit of the plot in the first act. It was pretty much detailed when Steppenwolf comes along and gets him, and then you've got Bruce Wayne and Alfred talking about them several times. It just seems there's far too much emphasis on them for some reason.
Ross, have you got anything else you want to chuck in about the characters at all before we move on?
I think the Flash is better served in the Snyder version. I mean, the original, Whedon's version, I didn't like him at all. I think he come across as a bit cocky and everything. But at least with the Snyder version, it's got me excited for the Flash movie that's coming out. Wonder Woman was totally different. I mean, I think she was a bit more darker in both films, but I think it's because of, what Snyder brings to the table. But as you quite rightly said, I think Aquaman gets a lot more backstory. Silas Stone, meanwhile, pops up a lot more too. There's a big, massive theme of a fatherhood and the relationships between parents and children, which, is a main part of Snyder's DC superhero movies. And I think Cyborg is virtually, I didn't like him in the original, but he's really good in this one, and it's a shame we probably won't get a film of him, his own film either.
And actually, another wee thing I wanted to add about Aquaman is Aquaman in the Whedon one was basically reduced to a joke. I hear you speak to fish thing that just kept on coming up, and it's like sort of bro humor they're going for. Yeah, Cyborg, really quite interesting, quite tragic story that they gave him in the Snyder one. It takes half of the Whedon one before we even find out what his backing story is.
Yeah. But you're going back to that Aquaman moment, and this is the most bizarre thing I can say. When Bruce Wayne walks into that pub and lets everyone know, like you said, that he's Batman, they have this odd confrontation, and then Aquaman, jumps in the sea and swims off. But in the Snyder version, you get the same similar sort of scene. Then all the people around him start singing. And now that shouldn't work. But I was sitting there going, "Oh, I like this." Any other scene you think this is daft? Why these people start singing in song? But it somehow absolutely worked. And yeah.
It does seem to add a layer to the lore, I suppose.
Yes, yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
What did everyone think of Martian Manhunter's cameo? Personally, I felt it was a little tacked on, maybe just there to appease some fans.
I don't know the character at all, so I had to Google afterwards and find out who Martian Manhunter is. It was a strange thing to end the film on. I guess, if I will come to this at the end, we're talking about what the future direction for DC potentially would have been and what it's probably going to be.
I mean, this guy really is probably just as powerful as Superman and Wonder Woman. So why he only just reveals himself at the end, despite the fact we see him randomly, seemingly comforting Lois Lane halfway through the film, it just felt a bit silly, out of everything that's already happening. It just really didn't sit right with me. I mean, I thought it would have been a brilliant ending if they'd have left it after you've got that little nightmare section, Batman and the Joker have been having words, and then Superman comes along and leaves it on that ambiguous note. How good would it have been if the film ended there?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Like, I really quite dug the nightmare sequence, or the dark nightmare sequence, as people call it. Because, it goes back into the theme that he was trying to set up in BVS, where it's like, well, can we trust this? What happens if Superman just loses it one day? And very, 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 what we can assume is that Lex Luthor did something that led to the death of Lois, and then Superman just goes fucking raj. It was exactly what Batman had been worried about. And we know that time travel's in some way involved. But I thought it was interesting that firstly, actually, that Snyder actually shot additional footage of that. Because for Snyder, this is a total middle finger to the studio. It's, I'm going to hint at I'm going to make new footage to hint at a sequel that will never come out.
Well, Snyder's been quite open about what would have happened. I mean, in the next film, Darkseid would have returned again. I think it would have been 13, 14 months later. And eventually, he would have given Lois Lane to Batman to say hi to him in the Batcave. But Darkseid would have come in and killed Lois Lane. He would have killed, and Superman then would have blamed Batman. But I think what Zack Snyder said, is it the anti-life or the antimatter? Yeah. The anti-life would have affected Superman. It would have turned him evil, and Darkseid would have him in control. And this all built up towards the third film, which would have saw Batman sacrificing his life to save everyone, bringing Lois Lane back from the dead. Lois Lane, then with the child, would have had a son who wouldn't have had any powers, would eventually become the new Batman. So that was set out for a good little trilogy, which we never going to happen.
That probably would be a more rewarding angle than what we're likely to get, which will be a series of standalone films, and then eventually some sort of reboot.
Yeah. I think out of everything in the film, just that little sequence is what stood out to me the most. I think probably because it was so tantalizing as what it could have led to, the way it leaves it. You just think, oh wow, this is going somewhere, but inevitably it isn't.
It's one last part here before we ends up getting longer than the Snyder cut. Let's briefly talk about the action here. I know we've touched upon this with presentation, but with the action scenes, the Batman versus Scout part of the beginning, I found that really clumsy, far too much of an emphasis on close-ups, and it was strange to think this is by a guy who we know is an accomplished director, because that was in the Whedon reshoots. Whereas with Snyder, I think I would like to if there was a real emphasis on destruction in it. The bit where the temple falls into the sea, which we did not see in the Whedon version. It showed there's consequences here. He's chucking the horses around. I was like, oh no, I don't want to see the horses get hurt. With so much more impact to these sequences, and a much more of a sense of jeopardy that we have. The only action sequence I wasn't hugely sold on was the tribute to the original Superman when Flash reversed time by running really quickly.
I didn't like the Flash symbols, when he's running in slow motion, the blues thing. That's the only thing I didn't buy. For some reason, it really put me off. I prefer the Flash from the TV show, how they do it that way, which is bizarre because it's a lower budget. But, the blue streaks and everything, it didn't bite for me. And I hope they change that for the Flash movie.
Yeah, and the way he runs in general as well. I mean, I know he's running faster than the speed of light, but it just looks really silly. You never know. The tagline for the Flash movie might be, "You'll believe a man can run." I'm
still laughing at the fact that David said that he had no idea who Martian Manhunter was. So when Clark's brother came out and changed, he must have thought, what the fuck?
Yeah. I was like, what the fuck?
I'm still laughing behind. I'm just giggling in my head. Got to come out of your face. What the heck?
Like I said, I loved a bit where Flash is running towards Superman, and then Superman just turns around to stare at him. I was like, yes.
Yeah, that's a fun little bit. just the look of fear in the Flash's face when he realizes that he's, on the same like time wave as him.
What do you think of Dark Superman?
I think that's more of just an homage to the is it the Death and Return of Superman, that plot line where he is killed by Doomsday but eventually resurrected. I've seen that animated film of that a couple of times, but I forget the circumstances around that. But basically, he's buried in a black suit, and I think he just sticks with it, if I recall correctly. So I think it's just an homage to that.
There's just fan service. It was, people have been demanding for years, and they, could he wear a black suit? And I think Snyder just abided by it to give the fans what they want. It didn't bring nothing to the storyline, let's be honest.
No. What was everyone's feelings on that scene where you've got Superman fighting the rest of the Justice League? Personally, I was surprised that was originally there, because even in the Snyder Cut, it felt a bit shit. Really. It was a bit underwhelming for Superman's, first reappearance. I mean, regardless of which film you're watching, you've waited the whole film for this point, and it just felt like a bit of an anticlimax, if I'm honest.
I was a bit shocked when they done it. I thought that was probably Whedon edition. So when they repeated the same in the Snyderverse, I was like, oh, okay, that's a bit strange. I didn't buy it now then, and I'm not buying it now. But that's probably just the weakest part in both films. Well, Snyder's film, everything's weaker, but the Josh's film, let me tell you.
I was okay with it, but again, it comes down to this sort of like Superman doesn't really need them kind of narrative. Like, I was surprised at how much harder he was than Wonder Woman in it.
Prior to the film, I'd always seen them as equals, really.
Right, and then there it's like, this guy is harder than the entire team combined. Basically, you can headbutt them through the ground and stuff like that. It's sort of made the rest of the team look a bit feeble in comparison, and so I thought that was unfortunate.
As they're all, apart from Batman, they're all classed as gods, really, aren't they? I mean, the Flash isn't quite as strong, but he's got his strong points. But I guess it's just to emphasize that Superman is what they need to save the day, I suppose. But just that whole sequence from where they go into the mothership all the way through to Superman flying off of Lois, it just that's probably one of the weaker moments for me. Probably just it was a bit underwhelming that's how he comes back. I thought there may be something more supernatural to it, because you've got that bit right at the end of Batman vs Superman where you see the dirt on his coffin start to rise before it cuts away, and you think, ooh, here we go. But then it's just completely forgotten. Yeah.
Talk about where the DC universe is headed, if it's headed anywhere, because we have a few movies coming out. We've got the Robert Pattinson Batman's coming out. We have J.J. Abrams is doing a new one with them right now, is he not?
Well, J.J.'s planning a Superman film, isn't he? That's the next in the line, but it's a bit top secret at the moment, and we don't know if Henry's going to come back in the role, so we're probably looking at another reboot. Obviously
the success of Joker, I think that might push him towards doing more of these sort of standalone films, saying, look, for the extended universe stuff, we fucked it by this point. We're not going to see the stuff that's been set up in the Snyder Justice League, because that's not canon right now. Maybe, who knows, maybe they will restore the Snyderverse as the current hashtag goes, but...
but I disagree with that, with the Justice League not being canon, because obviously I think it all counts now what happens in the Flash movie. So it's either going to be a big, massive reset, or it's going to open up in a big, massive, possibilities. Because what the DC world have done, especially in the TV land, is... in the Flash, when they done the Crisis of Infinity Earth, the 4-hour special, which is absolutely brilliant. I think Jim will tell you that. And they actually had one scene where the Flash's TV, Grant Gustin, meets Ezra's Miller Flash, and actually gives him the name The Flash. So that has opened up a whole possibility of where DC can go from now. So I think it's going to be, honestly, he turns up and he said, what did you call me? You called me The Flash. So that's how he got his name. And I think that scene alone has opened up a massive possibility for the DC world. And it's going to be very interesting to see what happens, especially if it's rumored that Michael Keaton is going to play Batman in that film.
Yeah, I mean, like the Flash, I think, is key to continuity here, because you've got the Flashpoint storyline in general, because what it is, the Flash, like we've now established that he can go back in time if he runs at a certain speed. But that's always been part of his story. And he goes back in time to stop his mum being killed, basically. And that has serious ramifications for what happens in the future. And then, say, the TV show, for example, after he does that, certain things he interferes with by time traveling has effects in the present. So one of his friends, he's got a daughter. When he comes back, it turns out he's got a son. So there's various little tweaks in the timeline that can be affected by what the Flash is doing. So I wouldn't be surprised if they tried to keep a continuity going, but the fact they've mentioned having Ben Affleck, Michael Keaton, and so on in the Flash movie tells me that maybe they're going with this whole multiverse thing, and therefore kind of keeping with continuity, but going off and doing their own thing with it as well. So,
what I would love is if Michael Keaton comes back as Batman, because there's a bit of doubt to the moment, and he doesn't know, he's unsure if he's actually going to do it because he just haven't got the time. But I would love if he came back and he enjoyed it so much and the Flash movie works that it could lead to Batman Beyond. Because I would love nothing more to see an old Batman train a younger Batman. I think every fan wants that, because Batman Beyond is probably one of the best cartoons of Batmans of all time.
Yeah, the pilot for that was very good.
Yes, it was.
Isn't the Batman the next DC film we've got coming out?
It's Suicide Squad's the next one.
Oh, sorry, of course. I don't know why, but I keep forgetting about those films.
The trailer for that dropped today.
Yeah.
And I tell you, it didn't really do that much for me, but I really liked the look of that shark.
Oh, King Shark, absolute favourite of mine. Loved him in the Flash TV show. I don't know if it's fact or not, but I think he may be voiced by Sylvester Stallone in the film.
Oh shit, that'd be cool.
It's James Gunn, boys. He's gonna nail it. It's gonna be Guardians of the Galaxy 18 version. What more can we ask for? It's gonna be brilliant. Trust me.
Oh yeah, I think a lot of these characters we're seeing, like in the posters and trailers, are going to die within about 5 minutes as well, which will be hilarious.
Yeah, especially the upcoming ones. You've got Wonder Woman 3's coming up.
Yeah.
There's something called Black Adam. I don't got no idea who Black Adam is.
He's the arch nemesis of Shazam, and he's getting his own film before the two meet. So that'll be interesting. Apparently, Pierce Brosnan's been lined up for Dr. Fate in that film.
Shazam's got a sequel too coming out, I believe. And so it has Aquaman.
Go back to the Batman or with Robert Pattinson. I weren't quite sold on the trailer. I didn't quite. I don't know why. Maybe it's a bit too soon after. I had that Spider-Man kind of vibe. Soon as the Spider-Man 3 finished, they rebooted it like 5 years later, and I just get that same feeling again. But I'm hoping with Matt Reeves as a director, he should prove me wrong.
Well, it was originally planned to have Ben Affleck still, wasn't it? So, you never know. I mean, I'm definitely digging Robert Pattinson, trying his hand at Batman. I really rate him as an actor. There's not, other than Twilight, there's not been a bad film I've seen him in. So, I'm quite looking forward to seeing what he brings.
There's a lot of rumours about him and Matt Reeves hating each other.
Yes, I've heard that as well.
It's not like Pattinson. Apparently, there's a rumour that he shagged his co-star on top of the Batmobile.
Yeah, the girl who plays Catwoman. If you had the chance, you would. If you had the chance, you would.
I mean, it could be absolutely bollocks. Don't get me wrong. So, when we say that, this could easily be fake news. So,
allegedly.
Please don't sue us, Robert. I think he seems like a good choice for it. He's one of those actors who considering where he came from, he did the DiCaprio thing of really divorcing himself from his old persona.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the first film I saw him in since him being in Twilight was probably The Lost City of Zed, which was a great adventure movie. And then I've seen him in Good Time as well. That was really good. He's so good as a skeevy little bastard in that. But going back to DC movies as a whole, whether they should be standalone, whether it's a big universe, personally, I have got a lot more enjoyment out of the standalone films. I mean, I know Wonder Woman is part of this shared universe, but her films can be separated from everything else that's gone on. It's pretty obvious. And Birds of Prey was an absolute blast. So, yeah, personally, I'm not fussed either way which way they take it, because I've enjoyed all of the standalone films. And the Joker as well, I thought that was brilliant. I know that's been quite divisive as well, but personally, again, a fantastic film.
I think it's a new direction coming from DC now and Warner Brothers. You know, let's not copy Marvel. Let's do our own thing. And I think, you know, the Joker obviously was a starting point. Birds of Prey was totally different to the other films we've had before. And yeah, I think it all boils down to what the Flash movie brings, and then obviously the Batman movie.
Right. Yeah, DC's always been, on the darker side of comics. There's no two ways about it. It's them and Marvel are two completely different beasts. I mean, yeah, they're all superheroes, but that's what I like better about DC is it's always that, a bit darker and edgier.
But bringing James Gunn over was a clever ploy. That's ingenious. And honestly, I think the Suicide Squad will nail it. Let's hope it's a box office success, but then it's coming straight out to HBO Max, so how much of an impact that's going to be.
Plus, you've got Cineworld having that exclusivity deal with Warner's as well, which I do wonder where it leaves the other cinemas as well.
Times are changing, boys. Times are changing.
Because, I mean, it's miles away to my nearest Cineworld, so there's loads of Warner Brothers films, not just DC, but loads of other films coming out this year. You've got The Matrix, Mortal Kombat. I know not many people are probably looking forward to that as much as me, but, just those. I'm keen to see them on as big a screen as possible. And if I know they've got a deal which means it's not going to be on HBO until X amount of time has lapsed. But does that mean the same for other cinemas as well? It's
as soon as they put Wonder Woman 84 on Christmas Day out to straight out to streaming sites, then that was the start of the end of cinema. I know you still have the big releases, but I think we're going to go down this path now. I mean, they're already going to have a 4-week or 5-week gap on some films. And I mean, most people are going to wait, and if they can watch in the comfort of their home and save money. The only thing I don't believe is the price in it. I mean, Tom and Jerry popped up today and it's $15.99. I'm not going to pay that. Not to watch Tom and Jerry anyway.
As long as my local cinema's open, I'll take that every day of the week over staying at home and watching the film. I've got to be honest. Yeah, you can't substitute going to the cinema for me.
I'm kind of I want to agree with Jim. At the same time, I hate cinema audiences. So, particularly if you're watching a horror film that's not got an 18 certificate, you've got like lots of rustling and like people going all the way through it, and I'm like, nah, this isn't my thing. I like to go to afternoon screenings to avoid that sort of malarkey.
I went to see it in the cinema, and then this woman sitting in front of me who turned around. She was with her boyfriend, and she turned around and looked at me. She goes, "Oh, I hate clowns." And I looked at her and I thought, well, why are you sitting there going to watch this film? And that's all she did was scream throughout.
See, I don't know. Sometimes it can add to the atmosphere. I mean, sometimes there is a buzz when you're in the screen, isn't there? But then on the other hand, you do get the odd dickhead here and there. So.
Not when she had to scream like Flanders from The Simpsons.
Worst I fucking had was watching A Quiet Place, where there was only like 7 of us in the cinema screen, right? And there's a couple of people sat like 2 or 3 rows behind us, and we're just talking all the way through the film. I was like, this is one of those films that you really can't do this during. It's irritated the hell out of me. So yeah, for that reason, A Quiet Place 2 is one I'll definitely watch at home. Folks, we're about to enter our third hour, so depending upon how much is cut, this could be a Joss Whedon job, in which case we're entering our 90th minute. And what I thought it'd be fun to finish off by me reeling off Vulture.com's top 10 best DC films. They rank all 35, I believe they have here, and this includes the Snyder Cut, right? So I'm going to tell you numbers 10 through to 6, and I'll see what you guys think are numbers 5 through to 1. So, number 10 is Batman Mask of the Phantasm.
Yes.
Number 9, The Dark Knight Rises. Number 8, Joker. Number 7, Batman 1989. Number 6 is Batman Returns 1992, of course. What do we reckon are the top 5 DC films according to Vulture.com?
Wonder Woman, Superman, The Dark Knight, Batman Begins, and Green Lantern.
You got 4 of those correct. I got a feeling you're not quite serious about Green Lantern. Number 5 is Wonder Woman. Number 4 is Superman. 1978, obviously. Number 3 is Batman Begins. The Dark Knight is either 1 or 2. What do you reckon the other film is, Ross?
Steel.
Shaquille O'Neal's Steel. No, it's not Shaquille O'Neal's Steel. Number 2 is Superman 2. And so number 1,
obvious.
their best DC film of all time is The Dark Knight, which, to be fair, is a good answer. With iconic performance of Heath Ledger in that film. Yeah, towards the end it becomes Patriot Act propaganda, and that kind of pissed me off. But at the same time, wonderful performances, very good action scenes.
I absolutely love Heath Ledger in it. I think Heath Ledger's fantastic. I think we'll never ever see another Joker like that, even though, Joaquin Phoenix done a really good job. But for me, Ledger is just, wow. The moment he steps in and goes, "Would you like to see a magic trick?" and the pencil disappears, I was sold. I was nailed. Thinking, "Oh my good gracious me, this guy is fantastic."
Yeah, he was actually. Upon first watching it, he was genuinely scary. He just didn't know what he was going to do, and after seeing what he did with that pencil, you just had no idea where he was going. And I remember coming out of watching that for the first time shaking because it was that stressful.
I love when he's like setting fire to all the money, he's doesn't really give a fuck about this sort of thing. Because I know a lot of people who were like, oh, well, they obviously, they were trying to set up for a sequel by bringing Heath Ledger back, why Batman didn't kill him. You go, no, the reason Batman didn't kill him is because Joker would have won if Batman had killed him.
Yeah.
Like, it was like, that was the extent of the subtext of it, I'm saying, look, I can corrupt anyone here, I can make Batman kill me. And Batman's like, no. Which makes it even more striking what happens if Harvey Dent in the next sequence.
It's such a sad line he says in the end of that film as well. We'll be doing this forever. When he's hanging on the rope, and sadly, I was wondering if what did happen. I wonder if he would have, The Dark Knight Rises would have been a total different film. I know he probably would have had Bane, but I've always thought, the bit with the prison where they were escaping and Scarecrow is sitting there, and I always thought that would have been the Joker.
Yeah, I could have seen that. I would have been a. Like, I like to think he wouldn't have been the main villain again, but it would have been great just to have his presence there, And the thing is, the Joker is such an iconic character that, it's amazing what Heath Ledger did with him.
Absolutely. Talk about a hard act to follow. I mean, there was no way it was ever going to be as good as that in The Dark Knight Rises, which personally I think, again, is a great, great film, but it's just a different beast.
Quick question, it occurs to me. Can you think of any other example of 2 actors who both won Oscars for playing the same character?
No. Godfather, Part 2? Rob De Niro, Marlon Brando? Yeah.
Did they both win?
I don't know.
I'm not sure. I have to double check. That's what just zapped in my head then. It might have been, I'm not sure.
Did Jason Statham and Lee Marvin win Oscars for their portrayal of the same character? Was it from Point Blank?
If Statham ever wins an Oscar, congratulations. I'd be very, very surprised.
He should have won an Oscar for kicking a shark with his foot in the Meg. Before we go, though, can I just say, if you haven't seen it, the two guys who play the Penguin and the Joker in the Gotham TV show are absolutely fantastic as well. I have to mention them because they were, especially the Penguin in that, he's probably the best Penguin you've seen for a long, long time.
Never seen the Gotham TV show, but I feel like I sort of should now. Folks, I think we've got to get ourselves heady because this is the longest one we've done so far, I believe. And, to be honest, we've had a hell of a lot to talk about. In upcoming episodes, we will probably be, potential plans that we're going to be doing the Scream quadrilogy soon. Horror Cult Films will be returning to horror. Until then, folks, it's a goodbye from me, guys. Goodbye from yourselves.
Bye.
Check out HorrorCultFilms.co.uk. Music by White Bat Audio.